Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 3881, Infinity and Everything. I had been in the perfect land for such a long time. I thought I could control everything, so I released Mastma. Then, I started cultivating him bit by bit. I was glad to see him become much stronger. Especially when we were in the boundless shock world, I was deeply elated when I saw the range of destruction that he made. At the same time, I also despise the perfect land. Perfection means that it's already done, and there is nothing else to change. That's why I like the imperfection of the boundless shock world more. Mastma brought death, but he also brought forth creation and rebirth. However, he went out of control. That was my biggest mistake and failure. Clarence's voice became too dispirited. His confidence was crushed by repeated failures. Upon hearing this, Zen wasn't able to respond right away. He had never thought that Clarence would actually have a depressing personality. But, isn't there still a chance? Zen finally asked. Chance? What do you mean? Clarence replied. You have awakened. With your absolute infinite energy and the ancestry level bloodline, don't we have a chance to defeat him? Zen answered with positivity. Forget it, Clarence said with a bitter smile. I have already defeated him many times. It's still no use. I still wasn't able to stop him from downgrading the worlds, he continued. Well, it's better than doing nothing. Zen retorted, not showing any hint of willingness to give up. When he first heard of Clarence's name, he had several guesses and high expectations for him. Thus, he was disappointed and frustrated that this person wasn't what he thought he would be. At the same time, Clarence could actually read all of Zen's thoughts and memories. He could even feel his emotions, but he still didn't care. The downgrader always treated the creatures born outside of the perfect land as tools, while Clarence saw them as a process. This included the human beings, the four spirits, the fostering race, the cinnabar race, and the sacred spirit race. He saw their existence as a process, and now, that process would finally come to an end. All the positive and negative things that occurred within the process were actually insignificant. Everything would still end at the appointed time. Well, if you still want to resist, I can help you. You're already skillful in using the extreme form energies, right? The only difference between you and the downgrader is the amount of energy, but I can also give you what he already has, Clarence said unexpectedly. Really? You'd do that? Zen's eyes instantly lit up as he heard this. Yes, it's not that difficult for me, Clarence replied indifferently. Well, then, Zen took a deep breath and sincerely said, please entrust it to me. Clarence didn't say anything but just directly infused some memories into Zen's soul. Zen quickly and silently read these memories as he received them. After he finished, he suddenly understood why there was such a huge gap between him and the downgrader. If the energy of the ancestry level bloodline was likened to a line on a plane, then countless points could be acquired out of this line. This would be deemed as an infinite amount of energy. However, what the downgrader possessed were all the points in the plane. It was a different kind of infinity that would surely overwhelm even the power of the ancestry level bloodline. With this, Clarence had already bestowed Zen everything he needed. Now, you know what you are about to face. Let me see your resolve. I want to witness what this infinite strength could change. Clarence had somehow become excited that his voice was even trembling. Whoosh, whoosh, come out, you can't just hide for the rest of your life. The downgrader knew that he had many ways to kill Zen. However, he still needed to completely destroy the burial land before he dealt with Zen. In order to downgrade the worlds, he needed the primitive land. He didn't want to create a new one, which was why he hadn't destroyed the burial land just yet. For a while, he had been shouting in the whole burial land, but Zen was still nowhere to be found and wasn't making any move. Whoosh! Suddenly, the downgrader looked towards the center of the burial land, where many tiny creatures were currently gathered. Ha! The troubled creatures have arrived. If you still plan on hiding, the remaining creatures in your primitive land will all be eaten up. About 70 billion troubled creatures shrank into a ball with a diameter of tens of millions of miles, tightly wrapping around the Pear Hill, the ruined graveyard, and the other places. Meanwhile, the ruined graveyard was actually located at the edge, and the troubled creatures had already invaded it. Hurry up! Those monsters are coming. We have to run. What do you mean? Where do you plan on going? Didn't you listen to what Zen said? We have no choice but to fight against them. There's already no way to escape. The masters in the ruined graveyard had already been ready to fight or die. Previously, when they had escaped from the heads, they were able to hold on to a glimmer of hope. They thought that perhaps, they could do the same with the troubled creatures. These creatures looked dreadful, but if they worked together, they might be able to defend themselves. However, when the troubled creatures already appeared in the ruined graveyard, everyone was utterly dumbfounded. These creatures possessed demonic space theurgies. Their bodies flickered, making it very hard for them to capture their movements with just their naked eyes. Ha! You may be fast, but let's see how powerful you are. I'll send you back to the hell you came from. Augustus roared as he rushed towards the troubled creatures. He was one of the masters responsible for guarding the ruined graveyard. He released a huge diamond-shaped space, which spun crazily and dashed towards the first troubled creature. Augustus's other shore token had the space attribute, which was considered outstanding among the other shore tokens possessed by the warriors in the ruined graveyard. However, it was extremely inferior against the strength of the troubled creatures, which possessed the hyperspace extreme form. Buzz! Buzz! Augustus only saw a blur in front of him. The next moment, he was already grabbed by a huge troubled creature in one of its hands. These silly humans! You're so pathetically weak, yet you still struggle. Right after the troubled creature spoke, it stuffed Augustus into its mouth. Before he was chewed, Augustus's remaining consciousness had fallen into endless despair, and everything else went hazy. These troubled creatures are this powerful. There are tens of billions of them, for crying out loud. What an unjust world this is. In his fleeting thoughts, Augustus couldn't do anything but blame his weakness and the unfair world. Augustus. Not far away, Hallett was fast approaching. He shook the fishing rod in his hand, and a golden thread swept across towards the troubled creature. He was desperately trying to save Augustus by attempting to cut off the troubled creature's head using the fishing thread. However, just when the golden fishing thread flew out, Hallett suddenly felt that a huge black shadow brushed past him. Then, he noticed that his body became lighter. As he looked down, he saw that the lower part of his body was already cut off. Beside him, he saw a floating troubled creature, and the lower part of his body was hanging on its sharp nails. Do you even know how weak you are? Ha ha, these people have a death wish. The troubled creature licked the blood off its nails as it stared at Hallett. These creatures, they're just soldiers, yet they are this powerful. Hallett coughed out blood as he looked at the troubled creature in disbelief. He knew that he wouldn't be able to survive after the damage he suffered. He even thought at first that with his strength, he might be able to kill at least 1,000 or 10,000 of them. Never did he expect that he couldn't even deal with a single one. Crash! As Hallett's body was falling to the ground, the troubled creature launched another attack. Its movements were so fast that Hallett didn't even have any time to react. As the troubled creature's fist landed on Hallett, his body instantly turned into a blood mist. The other warriors at the other shore realm had initially mustered their courage to guard the ruined graveyard against the troubled creatures and put their lives on the line. However, when they saw what had happened to Augustus and Hallett, they all fled and dispersed in all directions. Unfortunately, in the face of these vicious creatures, no one could get away from them. In an instant, all of them were mercilessly killed. It wasn't even a battle. It was just a massacre. Only the Pearhill was able to resist the troubled creatures, and it was all because of Zen. Previously, he had used the hyperspace extreme form to create a huge blue ring of light. Whenever a troubled creature passed through the blue ring of light, their hyperspace extreme form would be countered. Chapter 3882, Resist. At that moment, the masters who gathered on the jadeite platform had dispersed and stood in different locations. The troubled creatures were not that strong, but once they acquired the hyperspace extreme form, the creatures from the third-grade world stood no chance against them. But there was a catch. Once they lost the hyperspace extreme form, they would get significantly weaker. Buzz. Meanwhile, a wisp of sword light that was as thin as hair continued to wander around. It was powerful, albeit restless. It could cut a troubled creature that came into contact with it in half. What was more amazing was that there were dozens of such sword lights. Rocher sat cross-legged by the end of the sword lights, and the lone sword stood in front of him. When he had first obtained the lone sword, he tried to learn more brilliant sword skills to use his sword to its maximum potential. However, after its merge with the sunlight annihilation light, Kincaid gave him some advice which enlightened him and changed his views about some things. For instance, he realized that he did not have to spend too much time studying swordsmanship, spear skill, or blade skills. Generally, those who had reached a certain level in this field and possessed more energies that they were skillful enough to use would be the great masters. Therefore, it was useless to attach too much importance to the techniques or intents. Zen had realized that when he merged with the other shore tokens in the source world. Although Rocher had fused with all kinds of powerful other shore tokens, he lacked actual combat experiences. The latter only became aware of it much later than Zen did. The sunlight annihilation light is indeed sharp and powerful. It's a useful tool to terminate so many troubled creatures, but the energy of the destruction extreme form is too much, Rocher muttered to himself. He looked around with fear in his eyes. Every time he took out a troubled creature, a purple light ball emerged from it. The energy of the destruction extreme form inside the purple light ball was overwhelming. Moreover, Rocher figured that even the amount of energy he would obtain through burning 10 other shore tokens was less than that of the purple light ball. If he destroyed hundreds of troubled creatures, hundreds of purple light balls would appear. The mere thought of it sent him into a flurry of panic. He tried to break the purple light ball with the sunlight annihilation light, but the sharp sword light only touched the purple light ball, then vanished into it. Even the amount of energy in a holy item was far less than that of the purple light ball. The only thing that made him slightly relieved was that the purple light balls descended quite slowly. It would take them quite a while to reach the pear hill. Boom, boom. Suddenly, large 8-diagrams shadows exploded in the air, and Fuxie's palm crushed dozens of troubled creatures in the process. Plop, 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 plop. After the troubled creatures had died, they turned into purple light balls and slowly came down. Just as his head ached because of the purple light balls and did not know what to do, he looked up, and what he saw surprised him. Thousands of purple light balls had appeared above his upper left side, and a figure floated among them. Although he could not see it clearly, he could tell that it was Jeffrey. Then, Jeffrey punched the troubled creatures. He used 30% of his strength for this attack. Afterward, a fan-shaped wave spread out in front of him. All the troubled creatures covered by the fan-shaped wave got pulverized and turned into purple light balls. Once Jeffrey had dealt with the troubled creatures around him, he went past the purple light balls and targeted another group of troubled creatures. Once again, he destroyed them with a punch. Since he had chosen the most efficient method to clear up the troubled creatures around his area, there were far more purple light balls in his surroundings than in the other places. "We have to stop," Fuxie shouted. Kincaid, Hilario, the snake goddess, and the others tried to wipe out all the troubled creatures. When they heard Fuxie's call, they slowed down. The snake goddess's eyes flashed with confusion. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Those purple light balls will destroy Pear Hill," Fuxie answered. "So what?" the snake goddess asked again. "Can't we stop that?" Fuxie said with a pained expression. "Are you serious?" the snake goddess said and smiled. "I have to admit that sometimes, Fuxie is too naive. He still does not know about our current situation. Everyone here has pulled out all the stops to fight the troubled creatures, and we know what we are doing. There are over 70 billion troubled creatures here. Furthermore, they were all infused with the energy of the destruction extreme form. Even if these troubled creatures did not fight back and waited for us to put them down, the extreme form energy from their corpses will kill us all. We are doomed to lose," but Fuxie still wanted to win, she thought to herself. "Let me give it a shot," a soft voice spoke. It was Yan. Everyone turned to look at her. Yan's energy shaft could transform the energy, provided that the energy had no master or that the energy didn't belong to those that carried it. Thus, Yan might successfully transform the energy inside those purple light balls. At that point, she took out her energy shaft. Then, her gaze landed on the purple light balls. For her, these extreme form energies were no different from wild monsters. She clasped her hands and tightly closed her eyes as if she tried to communicate with the ownerless energies. A few seconds later, something had changed. Tiny bubbles appeared on the surface of one of the purple light balls. Yan abruptly opened her eyes and shouted, "Stay put." In turn, the purple light ball that was slowly falling stopped in its tracks and floated in the air. Everyone who saw what happened was dumbfounded. They did not expect that Yan would succeed. "She did it. She can control the extreme form energy," Fuxie exclaimed excitedly. "She has special powers," Kincaid praised as he nodded his head. "But she only controlled one. There are still so many of them left. We can't change anything," Eastern Emperor Tai said with a bitter smile. As for Yan, she remained calm and composed even after she kept the extreme form energy under her control. Then, she opened her palms and said, "Separate." Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Purple flames came out of the purple light ball that she controlled and flew towards the other purple light balls. Eventually, she was able to control the other light balls and suspended them in the air. Just like that, she controlled even more and more purple light balls. In a short time, she had managed to make over 20,000 purple light balls float in the air. Well done, she has truly controlled the purple light balls. Can Yan really use the extreme form energy? While everyone chattered about Yan's progress, Yan stayed focused as sweat broke out on her forehead. She drew the purple flames out of the 20,000 purple light balls, then used the fires to make a net to trap the troubled creatures. In the blink of an eye, thousands of troubled creatures fell dead. All this time, the downgrader who hid in the cloud of probability extreme form secretly watched the scene. Energy shaft. They've got so many interesting gadgets. But what's the point of holding on like this? He murmured to himself. It was already amazing that Yan had controlled tens of thousands of purple light balls in such a short time. However, there were about 70 billion troubled creatures left. It only meant that she had to control another 70 billion purple light balls, even if they were lucky enough to kill all the troubled creatures. It was impossible for her to control all the purple light balls before they turned Pear Hill into ruins. Chapter 3883, The Desperate Situation. The downgrader was not in a hurry to make a move because as long as he wanted to, he could destroy everything in a snap. Even the destruction extreme form that was controlled by Yan had been given by him voluntarily. The energies were, in fact, not ownerless. The downgrader liked to watch life being destroyed little by little. He had already experienced great destruction many times. In the end, these creatures were just like bees whose hives had been set on fire. In order to defend their homeland, they desperately tried their best, yet they fell into the abyss of their defeat in the end. After Yan had killed thousands of troubled creatures, numerous purple light balls started to appear again. Her clear eyes opened wide as if she was dreadfully glaring at them. Moreover, the energy shaft above her head rotated like crazy. Swish, swish, swish. Many purple snakes then shot into the purple light balls one after the other, and the ownerless energies were controlled by Yan once more. 20,000 purple light balls were already a difficult challenge for Yan. Now there were over 4,000 more balls, which stressed her out even more. Kill, she shouted as she gritted her teeth. She pulled out a larger purple energy net from the purple light balls, using it to envelop the sky. More troubled creatures were killed as their bodies touched the energy net. Purple light balls burst out from their broken bodies, melting into the energy net and further strengthening it. After a while, the net made by Yan had grown much larger as the number of purple light balls that were fused into it already reached 50,000. Yan, the snake goddess looked at Yan with concern, but she couldn't persuade Yan to give up just yet. Auntie, Jeffrey felt sorry for her and was also worried about what would happen next. Yan's hair began to stand strand by strand as her eyes became unfocused and rolled up. These were obvious signs that she had reached her limit. But she didn't dare give up easily. The moment the net covered the entire Pear Hill, it would definitely and totally be destroyed. Rise. She had almost run out of the potential of the energy shaft as she maxed it out until its last bit. As a final move, she tossed the huge net into the air. As soon as she did, she declined into a state of exhaustion and suddenly went falling from the sky. In a flash, the snake goddess stretched out her arms to catch Yan and held her. I've tried my best, Yan said as she looked at the snake goddess with tired eyes. You've done very well, the snake goddess affirmed her as she smiled. But I still can't protect the Pear Hill, said Yan in a disappointed tone. The snake goddess sighed and said, silly girl, who can protect the Pear Hill? The Eternal Realm warriors, the Chaos Ancient Gods, or the Human Spirit King could not even do that. It was already amazing that Yan could achieve all this. Are we really all going to die? Yan asked, looking straight into the snake goddess' eyes. She had been summoned to the Jadeite platform by Zen. Although she knew how serious the situation was, she still believed that there was a chance to win. All of us will die, and there is no exception, the snake goddess told her calmly. Despair appeared in Yan's eyes as she glanced at the huge blue halo in the sky. More and more troubled creatures continued to descend in groups like a horrendous storm. The number of the first group of troubled creatures she had annihilated before reached 50,000, while the number of troubled creatures at the top of the Pear Hill alone had reached 10 billion. Where is my brother? Yan asked, directing her eyes at the snake goddess again. I don't know. The snake goddess shook her head. Zen's avatar, which had been left on the Jadeite platform, was killed, but his real body had mysteriously disappeared. Judging the energy possessed by the downgrader, Zen's chances of surviving it were slim. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Meanwhile, Roche, Jeffrey, and Kincaid still gave their best as they tried to attack and kill all the troubled creatures. The falling purple light balls were unstoppable. They slowly descended to the pear hill, devouring every part of it they landed onto. This created countless big holes, and even the jadeite platform was eaten up without exception. There were a lot of cities on the hillside of the pear hill, and panic started to spread among their residents. Those purple light balls are coming for us. Run. Leave the pear hill. They knew that the pear hill was their last shelter, and they couldn't escape death even if they tried to run away from it. However, they were left with no choice but to give up their homeland and flee in this time of crisis. However, before these people had moved far away, the troubled creatures came rushing from different directions and attacked them. These troubled creatures didn't pass through the blue halo, and their hyperspace extreme form was not offset. This group of monsters feasted on all of the people first before they invaded the cities for more slaughter. The number of troubled creatures descending from the top of the mountain was 100,000 at the beginning, and then increased greatly and reached up to tens of millions. Jeffrey and his group laboriously passed through the cracks of the purple light balls, taking advantage of the narrow spaces just to counterattack. Ah! A voice suddenly screamed. When Eastern Emperor Tai accidentally touched the purple light balls during his journey, he was directly devoured by the destruction extreme form. His physical body at the eternal realm was fragile as a piece of paper in the face of the purple light balls and completely melted. Yasamine, King Yayan, and the others didn't even have the time to scream before they evaporated into a layer of thick green smoke and disappeared. 80% of the strength. Jeffrey detected a sight in the gap between three purple light balls and threw a forceful upward punch. Terrifying waves of power surged up. As the troubled creatures were densely standing close to one another, this punch might produce hundreds of thousands of purple light balls. Ouch! He felt a sharp pain radiating through his body after he had thrown the punch. Surprisingly, one of his hands was sucked into one of the purple light balls. By the time he pulled it out, his flesh and blood had been obliterated, leaving only the ghastly white bones of his clenched hand and fingers. Luckily, Jeffrey's physical body was very powerful. If other people encountered this situation, they would certainly die. The number of purple light balls continued to increase, leaving them lesser and lesser room to dodge. In the end, Jeffrey, the snake goddess, Yan, Fuxi, Roche, and Hilario were all cramped up in a small space. A suffocating sea of purple light balls surrounded them. Where is the human spirit king? The snake goddess asked, looking at each side. Since his treacherous being body has been devoured, he should be able to revive on the other shore, Hilario concluded. Why don't we use the grand teleportation technique to jump out? Suggested Fuxi. It's useless, Roche said, shaking his head as he frowned. The troubled creatures with the hyperspace extreme form gathered around and waited for them. If Fuxi and his group jumped out, it would only be faster and easier for them to be killed. The space suddenly began shrinking, squeezing rapidly against their limited space. 100 feet, 50 feet, 30 feet, 10 feet. The group of people then huddled together, trying to compress as much as possible in the tiny space they had. In addition, it became very much inconvenient for Jeffrey, who was about 10 feet tall. Even if he initiated to fold both of his arms and legs, he was still taller than ordinary people. It's so exciting. I didn't expect to die like this, said Fuxi as he stared at the overwhelming light balls. This way of death won't cause too much pain after all, said the snake goddess. Let's just have a good time then, Fuxi said, preparing to jump into the purple light balls. But just as he was about to plunge in, a thin layer of light instantly covered his whole body. This light film that was as elastic as rubber dragged him back and firmly bound him with the others. Meanwhile, as the purple light balls pressed towards the light film did not flinch at all and remained unaffected by the destruction extreme form. This must be. The snake goddess' eyes lit up as she realized something. It was not hard to guess who was still able to protect them at this time. Chapter 3884, Protector. Everyone felt a glimmer of hope when they realized the light film was protecting them. Just a moment ago, they had all been grimly resigned to their death. But now it seemed all was not lost after all. Is it Zen? Has he come to rescue us? Zen, Father, each person in the group called out. There was no response from the voice they were expecting to hear. A mocking voice rang out instead. Finally, you decided to appear, the downgrader taunted. But you won't be able to change their fate. Ha ha ha. Rumble. A thin spike shot out from a purple light ball. The spike spun wildly, gathering momentum before stabbing at the pale yellow light film. The pale yellow light film was condensed from the energy transfer extreme form, which could easily isolate, transfer, and gather all kinds of energies. But it was vulnerable to piercing. The sharp spike entered the light film with only a slight twist. "Auntie, watch out." As the spike headed toward Yan, Jeffrey threw his whole body in front of her, exposing his back so the spike would hit it instead. Phew, the spike skewered Jeffrey's shoulder, baring his bones. Ah, Jeffrey's face contorted in pain, but he remained in place, blocking Yan. Jeffrey. Yan felt her heart drop. It was unbearable seeing Jeffrey suffer for her. Buzz. Despite her exhaustion, Yan once again used her energy shaft to try to control the purple spike. To her dismay, however, she found that she could not. She had been able to control the purple light balls before when they had been ownerless. But now, the purple spike was under the control of the downgrader. Yan's energy shaft couldn't wrest control at all. Jeffrey gritted his teeth and hissed as the spike continued to sear through his flesh, blood, bones, and his insides. The others could only despair at the sight. They were completely helpless. They knew if they came into contact with the destruction extreme form, they would turn into ashes. Only Jeffrey's extremely strong physique could endure it. "This is your son, isn't it? Can you really bear to see him slowly melt away and die in agony? What kind of father are you?" The downgrader had no empathy, but he could read the memories of those gathered here and figure out Zen's thoughts. Green ripples started covering Jeffrey's body as the life extreme form energy worked double time to heal him even as he continued to endure grievous injury. The pale yellow light film started unraveling, its threads extending towards the rapidly spinning purple spike. The energy transfer extreme form merged with the destruction extreme form, dulling the latter's power. Ha ha ha, the downgrader's laughter echoed. He had been able to suppress Zen before. He just needed to do it again. Purr, purr, purr. Countless purple spikes shot out of the purple light balls, heading straight at the pale yellow light film from all directions. But before the spikes could penetrate the film, a blue light flashed. Those trapped were suddenly teleported away, from that cramped space in one moment to the fairy palace in the next moment. The fairy palace, located in the core area, hadn't been affected by the troubled creatures. Roche, the snake goddess, Fuxi, Yan, Hilario, as well as dozens of people including Lorena, Mike, Bromley and Rosie who had originally stayed in the Divine Land arrived at the same time by grand teleportation. "Why are we here, Yan? Why do you look so pale? Where is Zen?" Most of the ruined graveyard had been eroded. The Divine Land was also in a dismal situation. The troubled creatures had slaughtered their way to invasion. Lorena, Rosie and the others had fled into the evolutionary universe to go into hiding, but they knew it wouldn't solve the problem. It wouldn't be long before the troubled creatures invaded the entire Divine Land. As chaos erupted in the fairy palace with the new arrivals, floating golden particles appeared in the center of the courtyard. The golden particles, resembling ears of wheat, melded together, forming a human figure. The golden light dissipated to reveal Zen. Zen. It's really Zen. Zen is all right. He is safe. Those gathered here were obviously Zen's loved ones and those who cared about him the most. They had been beside themselves with worry for him. When the downgrader had occupied the entire burial land with the probability extreme form, he had killed all of Zen's avatars scattered across the burial land. Thus, the avatars Zen had created to accompany Letitia, Margaret, and the others had suddenly dissolved into a pool of blood. Up until this moment, they really feared that Zen had been killed. Zen did not respond to the rush of friends and family around him. He fixed a steely gaze on the skies. Buzz, buzz, buzz. One by one, the downgrader's avatars began to appear in the sky above the fairy palace. These were not illusions created by the probability extreme form but genuine avatars. 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. A million. A chill ran through those assembled below as the number of downgraders increased. "You really think your presence can change anything?" the downgrader said, sneering at Zen. Zen looked at the downgrader with a faint smile. "Try me." Zen radiated so much confidence the downgrader was a little miffed. Zen must have realized by now that there was a huge discrepancy in the energies they used. There was no chance of him winning. How could he remain so calm? Had he gone insane? "Oh, quit bluffing." As the downgrader spoke, he swung his fist. His over a million avatars likewise did the same. They all threw a punch at the same time. An invisible fluctuation spread through the space. The combined punches from the avatars were equivalent to a punch from the downgrader at maximum force. The impact would be enough to reduce the fairy palace into fine rubble. There was no way Zen could survive it. Bang! With a muffled sound, a fist print appeared over 100 feet above the fairy palace. An enchanted barrier that protected the fairy palace came into view. Bang, 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 bang. Fist marks crowded the surface of the enchanted barrier as the punches landed like rain. 1,000,000 punches had landed in only a few seconds, but they were all blocked by the enchanted barrier. What's this? The downgrader spat out, taken aback. How is that possible? In his opinion, Zen couldn't possibly bear 1,000,000 punches, but now he did it right before his eyes. Have I underestimated you? It began to dawn on the downgrader then that the energy given by the ancestry-level bloodline must be much more powerful than he had imagined. He steeled himself and once again activated the probability extreme form to launch another strike on the fairy palace. Countless downgraders gathered around the fairy palace in clouds created by the probability extreme form. They all struck out their palms downward at the same time. 10 billion strikes. Bang, 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 bang. Over 10 billion palm prints appeared on the enchanted barrier. The enchanted barrier trembled from the impact, but it remained intact. Bang, 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 bang. 100 billion strikes. The downgrader kept stepping up his attacks, but the enchanted barrier of the fairy palace continued to withstand it. After some time, the downgrader paused in silent thought. Something was amiss, and he had finally figured out what it was. Chapter 3885, The Attacking Method. Zen raised his head to scan the downgrader from head to toe. His posture remained unchanged since he appeared, and there was no hint of fear or caution. It was as though he was a lifeless statue. There was no movement or momentum, which was peculiar for someone that had infinite energy. It was unnecessary for the downgrader to initiate the confrontation using his bare fists. Of course, doing that was just out of habit. Maskma, can you stop? Zen asked as he directly addressed the downgrader. This was the first time that someone had referred to the downgrader by his name. Buzz. Hearing Zen speak it so casually infuriated the downgrader. The 6 pairs of compound eyes lit up simultaneously and shot out a sharp crimson light. The light was restrained to a certain degree, and it was as thin as a thread. It extended towards the enchanted barrier of the fairy palace and caused faint water ripples upon contact with its surface. The downgrader had no intention to attack Zen with this move, but his reaction was forced out of him through anger. Shut up, you're just a lowly human being. What gives you the right to tell me what to do? Let Clarence come out, let him talk to me. The downgrader shouted, his tone reflecting unparalleled rage. The people in the fairy palace were all taken aback by the downgrader's extreme reaction. Why was the downgrader so triggered by Zen calling him, Maskma? Clarence has grown tired of everything. He has entrusted his entire strength to me, Zen said as he returned the downgrader's stern look. You can't be serious. Why would Clarence give all his strength to a lowly human like you? This is outrageous. Zen's words seemed to have fueled the rage lingering within the downgrader that he was trying hard to suppress. Suddenly, a crack extended across his head, forming a large mouth intertwined with sharp teeth. He flapped the wings on his back to flaunt his dominance over Zen. The wings were abnormally huge with scales etched all over them. His appearance was nothing short of a demon who arrived straight from the depths of hell to unleash divine punishment upon them. Boom! In the blink of an eye, he advanced with untraceable speed and crashed into the enchanted barrier of the fairy palace. The enchanted barrier once hailed to be invincible was forcefully twisted out of shape by the downgrader. Although it didn't shatter completely after the first blow, some parts of it took reasonable damage and were weakened. The downgrader didn't stop there, he continued to press on the enchanted barrier to test the limits of its resistance. He was only about a foot away from reaching Zen. Why, just why was all of the strength passed down to such a lowly creature who doesn't deserve it? The downgrader roared out of frustration at Zen. His voice was even more piercing than before. However, Zen's demeanor remained steady and calm as he returned the downgrader's gaze. He had seen faint hints of the evil god's special characteristics from the downgrader. The downgrader portrayed all elements of the evil god's personality: strong, cunning, neurotic, and hysterical. The downgrader continued to roar on top of his lungs as he appealed, I'm this close to fulfilling your most cherished desire. I'm this close in making it happen. I'll be the one who will craft the most beautiful world you've ever seen with my own 2 hands. I implore you to take back your strength from this lowly creature. Of course, Clarence could see and hear the downgrader. However, he chose to remain silent as he stared blankly at him. Why did Maskma suddenly get so worked up about Clarence passing his strength down to Zen temporarily? The downgrader continued his rant for a long time before he went silent. His body was ultimately pushed into the air by the enchanted barrier of the fairy palace. Zen gave out an exasperated sigh and shook his head before his body slowly ascended in the air. He made his way out of the enchanted barrier and moved in front of the downgrader to look him dead in the eye. I'm in charge of the force of Clarence. Your biggest enemy right now is me. You don't deserve to wield it. Buzz. Countless downgraders overlapped with each other as they launched an individual palm strike aimed at Zen. It was as though Zen was being rained with an infinite amount of fists one after another. Take this. Boom, 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 boom. When the first strike struck Zen, a palm print was imprinted on his chest, and then it was later overlapped with another palm print. Then a third one, and a fourth, and a fifth. Within the short span of 3 seconds, Zen's chest was covered in tens of billions of palm strikes. His body almost became unrecognizable, now cloaked with countless palm imprints etched all over it. After being struck with those attacks, Zen's features and limbs were bent out of shape to the point that they were severely disfigured. His bones and flesh had been integrated into a single organism, and his appearance was reduced to that of a ball of meat that had been continuously kneaded for tens of billions of times. Purr. But after a short while, the ball of meat started to tremble voluntarily. Luscious thick black hair, a pair of eyes, mouth, nose, and eyebrows began to reappear from it. When the mold completely unwrapped itself, Zen regained his usual self seemingly unscathed. The onlookers from the fairy palace remained rooted to their spots as they watched the scene unravel before their eyes with their mouths agape. Their eyes couldn't keep up with the rapid palm strikes the downgrader unleashed on Zen, but they did witness Zen's body shaped up into a mold due to the pressure. To them, it was like watching Zen continuously being pinched by an invisible hand, and the mass of his flesh and blood was like rolling water. Were you able to make out what just happened to Zen? How did he suddenly become that thing? I can't tell what has happened, as it all happened so fast. Even the snake goddess, who was the smartest being present in that crowd, was rendered speechless at this sight. He must have been continuously attacked by the downgrader without pause, Hilario said as he stared up at Zen's floating figure. He was making this assumption because Zen had previously mentioned the attacking method of the probability extreme form in front of him before. His explanation already sounded too exaggerated. But what Hilario was unaware of was the fact that Zen was confronted with tens of billions of blows one after another, and if the downgrader wished, he could tamper with the frequency and increase the rate even further. You barely managed to tickle me. Was that the best you could do? It's my turn now, Zen said as he gave his knuckles a light crack. Zen was now the bearer of infinite energy that knew no bounds. He was able to release any amount of energy as he saw fit, and the reserves of it were absolutely limitless. Mirror, Zen exclaimed on top of his lungs. In response to his call, a circular silver mirror made of light stationed itself above his head. 10 billion, Zen narrowed his eyes as he glared at the downgrader staring back at him. Just as those words left his mouth, Zen felt the enormous reserves of ancestry-level bloodline gush out from him uncontrollably. If the energy of the ancestry-level bloodline was equivalent to that of a flowing river before, it had now upgraded itself and became as endless as seawater overflowing from every fiber of his being. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Soon, the sky was dominated by the presence of 10 billion silver light mirrors. The silver light mirrors distributed across the space soon became so overwhelming that it was hard to escape the sight of them. They lit up the entire sky in a flash. The troubled creatures that were still engulfed in their battle were forced to delay it as they raised their heads to make sense of the situation. Their vision was filled with many stars flickering and twinkling in the sky. The formation of the silver light mirrors seemed unorganized, but in fact, each of their positions was pre-planned according to a certain rule. Uniting, Zen yelled out another command. Buzz, buzz, buzz. At his words, each of the silver light mirrors began to emit streams of energy. These streaks of energy collided with each other and constantly bounced off each other until all of them gathered together to form an ingenious structure. Annihilating. A murderous look appeared in Zen's eyes. Whoosh. The silver energy flow collected itself at one point before unleashing itself wholly at the downgrader. This killing move was something Zen extracted from one of Clarence's memories. The technique did not have a unique name to itself. It only consisted of 3 steps: mirror, uniting, and annihilating. It was a carefully constructed attacking method that was created using 3 distinct extreme form energies. The turbulent energy flow flew across the air and pierced its way through the burial land from the center. In a short span of 30 seconds, the energy flow had traveled across the chaos and reached the edge. Boom! The energy flow contained an ominous aura and forcefully opened a big hole in the chaos leading to the abstruse energy world. At this time, the evil god's avatar was carrying the triangular rock to complete the enclosure. When his gaze fell on the stream of energy sweeping across the sky at an incredible speed, he couldn't help but feel startled at the overwhelming sight. His eyes slowly widened in surprise as he felt a deep fear sprout from within his heart. Where did that attack come from? Before he could speak more to voice his growing concerns, he felt a wave coming from behind him. As he turned around to know the source, his eyes met those of the real evil god. Wherever the avatar carried the triangular rock, the territory it covered was instantly marked as a part of the source world. The real evil god could then appear and disappear at will within the range. The real evil god also sensed an astounding amount of energy flow surging from the boundaries of the burial land. He moved out to check it out for himself. When he witnessed the large hole in the chaos, his expression darkened as a shadow hovered over his eyes. The strength of this energy flow was far beyond the conjecture of the real evil god. Chapter 3886, More Avatars. The evil god clearly knew the gap in strength between himself, Zen, and the downgrader. Even with the energy of the source world, he could only hold on for a few rounds in the battle against the two. Right now, he could only sacrifice the materials from the source world to sustain his energy. It had become a battle of limited resources against infinite energy. Sooner or later, the evil god would exhaust everything that he had and would be overcome either by Zen or the downgrader. Fortunately for the evil god, the intensity of the energy he could release in a round was by no means inferior to that of his two opponents. Now, his only problem was where to find more resources to cope with them. As he was trying to explore more sources of energy, he was also using the field to expand the source world indefinitely. If he made the entire chaos a part of the source world, then everything in it would belong to him, and he would be able to use them however he wanted. However, when he saw the energy flow that suddenly erupted from the burial land, the evil god was stunned. What the hell? Where does that terrifying amount of energy come from? The energy flow occurred within the scope of the source world, and the evil god estimated it using his omniscient power. But unexpectedly, as he discerned the flowing energy, he felt like his chest was smashed by a heavy hammer. Then, he found out that to release this energy flow, about 60,000 source worlds would have to be sacrificed. In other words, even if he decided to sacrifice the entire source world, the power that he would acquire would almost be negligible against what his opponents possessed. His throat felt dry and a bitter taste rose from it. In an instant, his arrogance vanished, knowing how pitiful his current state was. Shall we continue to enclose more lands? One of the avatars cautiously asked as he noticed the bad mood of the evil god. Yes, the evil god answered briefly, then quickly disappeared. Meanwhile, there was a huge square platform floating on the belt of the source world. On it, tens of thousands of avatars of the evil god were gathered. Light energy bands floated around the platform that formed huge fences, sealing the entire platform into what looked like a huge prison. With this, an avatar that wanted to escape from it would be instantly killed. Moreover, since the space was locked, they were unable to use the grand teleportation skill. At this moment, there was a fierce argument going on inside the prison. Energy and materials are just two sides of the same coin. This is an ironclad law. That's right. If there aren't enough materials, then there won't be enough energy to produce. Bullshit. The transformation of materials and energy only looks like this in lower grade worlds. How do you think Zen and the downgrader acquire so much energy? There must be a shortcut to obtain infinite energy in higher grade worlds. Then, we have to restore the energy as soon as possible. It's the only way to find this shortcut. The prison was very noisy as the avatars debated on how they could turn their situation against Zen and the downgrader. Every avatar hysterically expressed their opinions. They only came from a single person, but their ideas collided with each other. It was actually a good thing, so they could arrive at the best conclusion. At the same time, the Grand Master of Heaven and Duran were standing guard at the prison gate and were listening to the avatars' conversation. The two of them were greatly shocked at the intelligence displayed by each of them. With so many of them, their brainstorming became more efficient. Judging by their progress, it might not be too long before the avatars could realize how to find the shortcut that they badly needed. While they were listening intently, they didn't notice the grains of sand that were slowly floating out of the prison. Apparently, these grains of sand were from an avatar, who did not wish to participate in the other's discussion. Instead, he quietly sat in a corner and gradually turned his body into fine sand. The sand drifted little by little towards the prison gate, forming a thin layer, while the avatar's body was continuously shrinking. Hey, why is there so much sand on the ground? Finally, the Grand Master of Heaven inadvertently noticed the thin layer of sand on the ground. He and Duran were always on high alert. If it was just ordinary sand that fell on the ground, they should have noticed it at once. As they wondered and inspected the sand, it suddenly condensed into the avatar of the evil god. Since the avatars were almost the exact copies of the original, they had no way to determine whether he was the real evil god or not. Just when they were about to ask him, the evil god reached out his hand and gently waved at Duran. An invisible film instantly enveloped Duran, and at the same time, the avatar also stretched his other hand and grabbed the Grand Master of Heaven by his neck. I've actually been coveting your body for a long time now. If I want to be free from the real evil god, I need to possess your body shell, the avatar said with a sinister smile. Since the avatar could also use the extreme form energies, Duran and the Grand Master of Heaven were no match for him. You bastard, the real evil god is omniscient and omnipotent. Even if you take away my body shell, he will know instantly. Don't think that you can get away with this. The Grand Master of Heaven said in gritted teeth as he struggled to remove the hand of the avatar from his neck. Omniscient, omnipotent, ha, the power of the third-grade world is nothing. Do you think I can't deceive him? As he finished speaking, he didn't waste any time and began stealing the body of the Grand Master of Heaven. Soul Extreme Form. However, as the extreme form energy started activating, the real evil god suddenly appeared above the avatar and stomped him to the ground. Crash! The avatar's body immediately collapsed into grains of sand and quickly flowed to escape. Humph! Where do you think you're going? The real evil god snorted as he released several balls of flames that darted towards the sand. The flames quickly caught up with the sand and engulfed it. The painful roars of the avatar could be clearly heard from within the flames. As the sound dissipated after a while, the sand was burnt and was turned into a piece of smooth and transparent glass. Your avatars are really troublesome, the Grand Master of Heaven said as he still gasped for air from being strangled by the avatar. The real evil god just shook his head and turned to look inside the prison. I have no choice. I can't risk placing unwarranted fear in their minds. Huh, why not? Won't it be necessary so you could control them properly? Duran asked. The evil god pointed at his head and said, if they got too scared and paranoid, they would lose their imagination and creativity. Those are what we need from them. It'll be over if we lose that. Upon hearing this, both the Grand Master of Heaven and Duran understood him. Hey, an avatar suddenly greeted the evil god through the fence and gently pulled his hands together. At the same time, a pale red band of light slowly rotated around him. I have found a new field, and the creatures within it will fall into the chaos. The number of fields that he was talking about was 86. Indeed, the avatars were very efficient. They found several fields in such a short time. After they figured out the rules, their speed became so much faster, and it could still improve. However, the evil god still wasn't satisfied. Then, he slowly ascended to the top of the prison, looked down at the avatars below, and said, you've done a good job, but it still isn't enough. We're running out of time. I just saw a powerful energy flow from the burial land. We're in a very tight spot. How powerful is it? One of the avatars asked. It's equivalent to the energy of the combined 60,000 source worlds, the evil god said straightforwardly. What? An uproar suddenly rose from inside the prison. The jaws of the Grand Master of Heaven and Duran dropped hard. They even asked each other if they heard the same thing. In short, they have an infinite source of energy. We have no chance of winning if we just rely on the fields. I need you to find out the energy source and the shortcut to control it. I need more intelligence and more avatars. After the evil god finished addressing them, the belt of the source world began to tremble. He was planning to sacrifice everything in order to get what he wanted. Chapter 3887, Brains. From the continental plates, which were tens of millions of miles wide, to the fist-sized stones, they all turned into fine powder and floated upward into the sky. What happened? What's going on? Our bodies. They are collapsing. Still, a large number of the creatures remained on the belt of the source world. They all hoped to survive, but luck was not on their side this time. Each of them looked around in a panic as they saw inches of their bodies flaking off bit by bit, turning into dust and eventually, drifting into the air. A few wanted to escape while others wanted to resist, but their efforts proved to be useless at this point. The evil god was always firm with any decision he had ever made. Before, he thought he stood a chance with the help of the fields, but he soon realized that there was a gap too big to be filled. In this realization, he chose his last resort. Within an hour, all the things in the source world, along with tens of thousands of creatures, were sacrificed. At the same time, the belt completely disappeared and left only the prison on the platform while the black ship floated not too far away. Shira, the former captain, and Edna stood on the deck as they witnessed the broken source world disappear right before their eyes. Thanks to the evil god, my black ship will survive, the former captain said with a bitter smile. This is crazy. I like it. Too crazy, Shira exclaimed giddily. Edna looked over at Shira, her expression as calm as ever. No matter what the evil god did, she would wholeheartedly support him. Grow, the evil god roared. Just then, the prison on the platform expanded rapidly and new avatars shot up one after the other. The number of appearing avatars exceeded 100,000, then 500,000, and eventually, there were 1 million of them packing densely the platform. The Grand Master of Heaven looked at them and asked, how many avatars can be made once all the materials in the source world are consumed? The evil god looked down then proceeded to answer, around 4 million. Each avatar was far stronger than an ordinary warrior at the eternal realm, so the source world was limited to produce only 4 million of them. With so many avatars on our side, it's a force that can be reckoned with, the Grand Master of Heaven pointed out. The real evil god sneered, 4 million ants are still no match for an elephant. They are not strong in battle, but I only need their intelligence. One of the avatars who stood behind the prison fence overheard their discussion. If you only need our intelligence, then our bodies are useless. I suggest you create only our heads. The avatar's words struck a chord with the evil god. A big smile plastered across his face. That is reasonable, I will only keep your heads. This was an advantage because if he only created their heads, he would no longer need the prison anymore. At first, the Grand Master of Heaven thought the evil god had joked about creating only heads. To his surprise, the evil god immediately started to sacrifice for the second time. Most of the avatars agreed to the plan and readied themselves as they were eager to find the source of energy. Others, however, resisted and cursed at the evil god. Sadly for them, they had no choice. All the bodies of the avatars quickly disintegrated into pure energy. A few minutes passed and only rows of heads were left across the huge platform. At the same time, more heads were generated and appeared alongside them. Both the Grand Master of Heaven and Duran scratched their heads in confusion. Though neither of them followed any of the rules, they were still shocked with what the evil god had executed. What exactly was he trying to do? As they watched, they saw the evil god provide the energy for these heads. This was to ensure that they could think flexibly and extensively. The number of my avatars has soared. It is now 1,600,000,000. The real evil god nodded in acknowledgement of what he'd done. He was above and beyond proud of all the progress. In fact, he still wanted to create more heads, but he needed to reserve some energy for them to think. So 1,600,000,000 was the limit. The avatar that initially suggested creating heads spoke out once more, actually, our number can still increase. You'd only need our brains to contain our intelligence, and it's far more efficient to communicate with each other with spiritual senses. As they heard this, the Grand Master of Heaven and Duran gasped in shock. Was he serious? If rows of heads weren't wild enough, what more rows of brains? That's right, the evil god exclaimed in delight. Your eyes, ears, mouths, noses, skulls and teeth can also be sacrificed. After finishing his words, the real evil god clapped his hands and executed yet another round of sacrifices. Just like that, 1,600,000,000 heads were sacrificed once again. When only brains were left with souls within them, the number went up to a whopping 2 billion. These brains held souls that were stronger than any of the warriors at the Holy Soul Realm as they released spiritual senses to search around. It came to a point that so many spiritual senses were intertwined together in the air and formed a chaotic soul windstorm. Quiet down. Once the real evil god released a terrifying soul pressure, the 2 billion brains instantly withdrew their spiritual senses and the windstorm settled down into nothing. Afterwards, the real evil god began to delegate the tasks amongst the 2 billion brains before him. Some were responsible for thinking, some collected information, and some selected useful, decisive information. Because the brains contained much chaotic information, they had to work intrinsically together to pull everything off. As he finished his arrangements, the evil god turned around and gazed into the distance. All of a sudden, a silver light flashed. His eyebrows suddenly raised. Stretching out his hand, he retracted the black ship and the platform dozens of miles away. Without warning, the fluctuating silver energy flow shot over them all. The energy flow swept past them at unbelievable speed, then suddenly disappeared back into the void. The evil god was not the only one who caught a glimpse of it. The Grand Master of Heaven and Duran couldn't help but pace around as they saw the energy flow. This is the energy flow you mentioned. How can it hold such immense power? The real evil god looked over at them with a cold, motionless expression. This is the reason why I had to sacrifice the source world. As they knew, the battle between Zen and the downgrader in the burial land was still ongoing. Within such a short amount of time, Zen had already launched 6 sets of mirror, uniting, and annihilating in a row, which created gaping holes within the burial land. But even though his attacks were powerful, it was still unable to kill the downgrader. Just then, the downgrader released a light that resembled a dazzling golden sun. The sun surrounded him and expanded along the edge of the burial land. At the same time, the Pear Hill, the Divine Land, and the ruined graveyard were swallowed up by the golden sun while tens of billions of troubled creatures were killed in the process. The entire burial land grew still and silent, all except for the fairy palace that Zen managed to protect. Once the light of the golden sun eventually dimmed down, the silhouette of the downgrader appeared from a distance. In the past, when a world ended, Clarence and I had a fierce battle. That was definitely my favorite. This time, with you as my opponent, I have to say I am pretty damn bored. For him, Zen merely used tactics that attacked him instead of killing him. In the end, nothing Zen ever struck him with produced substantial damage to him. 10 billion. Zen stood up tall as he raised his hand into the air. Just then, 10 billion silver rings of light scattered across the sky. It seemed that he was still using the set of mirror, uniting, and annihilating. Whoosh, the energy flow gathered and rushed straight at the downgrader. Usually, all the downgrader had to do was dodge. However, he planned to forcefully block the energy flow altogether. To his surprise, as he resisted the energy flow, Zen's figure quietly disappeared. The next thing he knew, Zen stood right by the black light. Chapter 3888, The True Strength. The downgrader made his debut from the black light. Of course, Zen knew that this black light was essential to the downgrader. His real body was most likely hidden within it. Previously, Zen had attempted to destroy the black light with the destruction extreme form, but in the end, he only failed. Now that he realized his attacks couldn't hurt the downgrader even the slightest bit, he once again fixed his attention on the black light. It was impossible to destroy the black light just by relying on the destruction extreme form. However, Zen discovered a third G in Clarence's memories. Light clearing skill. A circular ring of light floated towards the black light and enveloped it, now beginning to rotate. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. As the ring of light revolved, the black light also swayed non-stop. Is it taking effect? Zen observed as his eyelids twitched slightly. He had tried several other methods before, but none of them could affect the black light even a little. The black light seemed to be in another world. Now, the light clearing skill could actually impact the black light, which brought Zen a glimmer of hope. Contract. Buzz. Buzz. The ring of light then contracted inward from its rotating motion. The moment the edge of the ring of light touched the black light shrunk slightly and surprisingly freed itself from the ring of light's control. The black light escaped. Zen frowned and pointed at it with his finger. He deployed the light clearing skill once more. 100 rings. 1,000 rings. 10,000 rings. Over 10,000 rings of light continuously appeared, all rotating and contracting at the same time. The black light started to shake violently, but without any further effect from the rings. You're really stupid, aren't you? Instead of putting up a fight, you actually want to destroy my source light. The downgrader suddenly appeared above Zen's head. He had already dealt with the energy flow released by Zen. Zen raised his hands and stared at the downgrader without saying anything. He then drew his hands closer to the black light. Fingernail-sized crystals started to float out from his palms, gathering towards the black light. Da, da, da. With a faint shattering sound, the small crystals merged into the black light. One by one, the crystals emitted a small dull green light as they broke. Soon, the black light was entirely colored green, and at the same time, turned into a solid object. This was another way of changing the shape and form of light. After the crystals had solidified the black light, Zen immediately yanked his fist and punched it forcefully. Boom! The solidified black light was smashed into pieces. However, the broken black light remained floating in its place. The downgrader, standing with crossed arms, didn't have any intention of attacking Zen at all. Instead, his eyes flashed with a faint yellow light as he showed a mocking expression. There were a great number of thirgies in Clarence's memories, all of which had been extracted from the extreme form energies. Many of them were indeed worth a try. Every time that Zen did, he looked at the downgrader and observed his reaction. Not a single thirgy was able to make the downgrader flinch. His face stayed plain and unbothered. After Zen failed 6 or 7 times in a row, the quiet Clarence finally broke his silence. It's useless, Zen. The source light is the privilege I gave him. It can't be destroyed. Privilege. Zen was stunned as he heard what Clarence just said. Yes, before he grew up, he had made this request, which was the privilege of never being destroyed. I thought carefully for a long time before I came up with this method. After I gave the source light to him, even I could not strip him off his power, Clarence recollected. Zen sighed as he was lost for words. Clarence himself had actually created a powerful enemy who couldn't be killed. What was he thinking? Since the source light can't be destroyed, how did you deal with him? Zen asked again, deeply thinking of a solution. From the higher grade worlds all the way to the lower grade worlds, Clarence chased Mastma and later got defeated in the deep space. Suppress him to the point that he can't get out of the source light anymore, Clarence replied. Every time I suppressed him in the source light, he could not bear it and would begin to downgrade the worlds, which I couldn't stop him from doing. In the 5th grade world, we had both suffered great losses. He failed to complete the downgrading while I had to stay in the heavenly ring staff. But we have the same energy and neither of us can do anything to each other. How can I even suppress him? Zen asked with hesitation. With a faint smile, Clarence responded, in my opinion, not only would you fail to suppress him, but you will eventually lose to him. Why, up to now, he hasn't even used his real strength. He and I know much more about energy than you do. Although you have absolute infinite energy, you're like a reckless man flailing a powerful saber around. Your skill is undoubtedly great, yet it is useless, Clarence commented harshly. If the downgrader heard those words that Clarence uttered, he would probably raise his thumbs in agreement. However, it was not Zen's fault. Even though he had obtained a portion of Clarence's memories, he had no other choice but to fall inferior to the downgrader. Then you. No, I won't make a move, Clarence said, immediately predicting what Zen was thinking. I've already told you the reason. Clarence had never been able to stop Mastma from downgrading the worlds, so he quit and had simply given up trying. It's a pity to give up like this. After all, remember, human, Clarence directly interrupted Zen again. I've already helped you understand my past to the greatest extent. As a human, you have your limits and you know it. It's meaningless to encourage me, persuade me, or even urge me. I have already given everything to you. This time, you have to strive for success on your own. After he finished speaking his truth frankly, Clarence fell silent again. No matter how many times Zen called him, he didn't reply anymore. He had already made up his mind to just be an onlooker. Zen, we can only rely on no one but ourselves now. The ancestry-level bloodline suddenly told Zen. Although Clarence had awakened, he hadn't erased the intelligence of the ancestry-level bloodline. Rely on ourselves. Zen narrowed his eyes slightly while gritting his teeth. You're right. Come on. This time, the ancestry-level bloodline released vigorous life energy which was the bloodline power of the life quadrant. The bloodline powers of the 4th grade world could not offer any substantial help to Zen, but they offered him great comfort that made him feel a little warm inside. At this moment, the voice of the downgrader suddenly echoed again. I have given you so many chances, but you chose not to seize even one of them. Now let's end this boring battle. The downgrader then stretched out his long and slender arms. Several extreme form energies started to circulate on the surface of his body, which later intertwined and merged together. This formed fat leeches that slowly crawled all around his body. Swoosh! In a flash, the downgrader came flying straight to Zen. Zen instantly avoided him by using his omnipotent power to move to the corner of the burial land. However, the strange thing was that the downgrader also arrived at the spot at the same time. His slender arms had already grabbed Zen's neck, and the leeches that originally lay on his body transferred quickly to Zen's. Da, da, da. One end of the leeches drilled into Zen's body, and the other remained stuck to the body of the downgrader, connecting the two to each other. It's such a waste to give you the ancestry-level bloodline, don't you think? Why don't you leave it to me instead? The downgrader said with an evil smirk. Chapter 3889, Absorption. Long ago, Mastma had tried to swallow Clarence. The attempt wasn't just undertaken once. He tried to swallow Clarence in the 11th, 9th, and 8th grade worlds but failed every single time. However, Clarence had just given his abilities to a human, which proved to be the greatest opportunity that had ever come for Mastma. He was not afraid of Clarence but being chased by him irritated him. Swallowing this troublesome guy's abilities would solve everything once and for all. Before Zen could prepare for the next round of counterattack, he found his body pierced through by leeches. Plop, plop, plop. The leeches were literally sucking away the ancestry-level bloodline in his body. Zen, leave him, the ancestry-level bloodline told him. It had previously resisted splitting itself before it awakened, so there was no way it was going to let the downgrader do the same thing. Okay, Zen replied, immediately moving away from where he once stood using his omnipotent power. This teleportation method had a very high priority in the primitive land. It was so fast that it did not even cause any space fluctuations. Swoosh! In just the blink of an eye, Zen found himself already on the other side of the burial land. Move away! Astonishment was evident on Zen's face. He had just moved tens of millions of miles, but the downgrader was able to keep up with him. No leech dislodged itself from his body while the downgrader remained at his heels, keeping a certain distance. Well, Zen gritted his teeth and once again used his omnipotent power, but the results remained the same. Wherever he went, the downgrader followed. Resistance is futile, the downgrader told him with a maniacal laugh as the leeches continued to absorb Zen's ancestry-level bloodline. No matter where Zen went, he immediately followed, so much so that it almost seemed as if the two of them had become one. The extreme form energy exerted by his constant movements practically covered the entirety of the burial land. Buzz! Zen was not convinced and moved 8 more times. The result was always the same, and Zen soon realized that there was no way he was going to get rid of the downgrader. I'll cut you off, Zen shouted in irritation. Soon enough, a new moon appeared in the sky. 1 token slash. This was a Thurgy he had obtained from Clarence's memories. He released an infinite amount of energy to maximize its power. As Zen summoned his strength, the new moon expanded from a few hundred miles to billions of miles long. This humongous moon was magnificent, but only a few people could enjoy its majesty. Those in the fairy palace had no idea of the ongoing fight between Zen and the downgrader. Pear Hill, the ruined graveyard, and the Divine Land were all but destroyed, along with the families, friends, and clans that once lived there. Only a few dozen people were left alive in the chaos, and an unprecedented sense of loneliness rose from the survivors' hearts. Look at that moon! Jeffrey burst in awe as he pointed up at the sky. Is Zen making a move? Mike asked, his voice tinged with concern. It should be him. The battle's not over yet. Yan exclaimed with hope. The entirety of the sky was covered by the new moon, which painted an incomparably shocking and beautiful scene. Whilst everyone looked at the moon, the snake goddess chose to ruminate in solitude. She stared at the direction of what was once Pear Hill. Despite being forcefully taken away from the source world, in the end, the Pear Hill was still destroyed. That was just how fate worked, it seemed. At that moment, an idea suddenly came to the snake goddess. She felt like a struggling insect that, no matter how high she flew, could not escape the trap she had stumbled into. Splash! The new moon slashed down, aimed at the leeches between the downgrader and Zen. Despite its size, the new moon remained as thin as a blade. As it fell, it began to shrink as all the extreme form energies gathered and condensed into one thin line of unimaginable power. However, all the downgrader had to do was gently push forward at the direction of the new moon, and an invisible enchanted barrier enveloped around them. Sizzle! This barrier inevitably collided with the thin blade of the new moon. At that moment, a sharp voice echoed within the void. There was no way infinite energy could offset infinite energy. The strongest spear could not break the strongest shield. It was the case in the fairy palace before, and the same held true now. Again, Zen shouted as he waved his hand. With that, several new moons once again floated in the air. These new moons surrounded Zen, slashing at the downgrader one after the other, to no avail. Dispersing state. In this seemingly hopeless situation, Zen chose to turn to his last resort, the disintegration of his body. As the owner of the primitive land, his ability was to disperse his body if ever he was killed. It was equivalent to suicide, but it was a choice he had to make for the sake of everyone. However, at the moment of his body's collapse, an extremely strong binding force held him together. His body collapsed without dissipating. Ha ha ha, the downgrader sneered. He was always one step ahead of Zen in this fight. They had the same abilities, but the same could not be said when it came to strength. As the ancestry-level bloodline was completely absorbed by the leeches, Zen's body floated, empty and devoid of everything. Puff! With a single glance, the downgrader set Zen's body aflame and burned it until it was nothing but ashes. Infinity plus infinity is still infinity. My strength has not increased, but I saved so much trouble. It feels good. The downgrader's 6 pairs of compound eyes flashed green, indicating his satisfaction. Buzz! With a slight buzzing noise, the downgrader's body disappeared and then materialized in the fairy palace. His presence quickly threw everyone in deep despair. There was no way Zen would have allowed the downgrader to enter the fairy palace unless he was dead. Thus, there was only one reason why the downgrader was here. Where is my father? Jeffrey asked through gritted teeth. He's dead. Your father has been absorbed by me. He is now a part of my own body, the downgrader replied. You're lying. Jeffrey screamed as he ran to the downgrader at breakneck speed and threw a punch to his face. The force from Jeffrey's punch had the ability to reach tens of millions of miles. However, despite his strength, the downgrader remained unmoved and unbothered. But Jeffrey did not care. He was angry and he had to vent his anger, so he continued to throw dozens of punches towards the intruder. Nobody dared stop him. Nobody, not even Rocher, Yan, the snake goddess, Fuxi, or Lorena, made a move. Their combined strength could not be compared to that of the downgrader. There was no need to fight a lost battle. In the middle of the fight, the downgrader finally made his move and caught Jeffrey's fist. With a slight twitch of his wrist, he was able to sever the young man's arm from his body. I felt nothing. Your punches couldn't even tickle me. You're poorly weak. As he ridiculed Jeffrey, fist-sized marks of the darkest black began to appear over the surface of the downgrader's body. These ink marks expanded and created cracks upon the downgrader's skin, signaling his body's collapse. Chapter 3890, Infinite Seals. Wait, what? The downgrader's 6 pairs of eyes flashed sharply, as though something sparked inside them. A strange feeling that could only be likened to confusion consumed him. Jeffrey covered his broken arm with his other hand, and he too felt strange. Although he had unleashed 100% of his strength in each punch, he never expected he'd be able to defeat the downgrader. He had been under the impression that even if he did go all out, he wouldn't be able to break down even the most basic defenses of the downgrader, let alone beat him like this. What have you done? The downgrader growled and took one staggering step towards Jeffrey. The surface of his body was riddled with black ink marks as more and more cracks appeared. Gradually, his skin began to flake off his body. I didn't do anything, Jeffrey said confusedly, taking a cautious step back. I just punched you. Yan, Mike, Rocher and the others, who had been watching from behind Jeffrey, were all rendered speechless. The snake goddess eyed the downgrader warily. Raising her thin eyebrows gently, she suddenly had some sort of a premonition. Whipping her head around, as expected, she saw a faint figure quietly materializing. It was none other than Zen. The downgrader also sensed Zen. Now, he didn't feel that overwhelmed, but he still felt the need to ask, how did you do it? It seems you don't know everything about the extreme form energies. You don't even know the power of crystal solution. A faint smile crept on Zen's face. Since I couldn't defeat you, I had to turn myself into a poisonous pill for you to swallow. Then, it dawned on the downgrader. The power of the crystal solution. He echoed softly, as though in a daze. I see. It was a kind of poisonous energy formed by combining several extreme form energies. While it was lethal as a weapon, it was difficult to use. The downgrader had wanted to devour the ancestry-level bloodline, which gave Zen a chance to deliver the fatal blow. Ha ha ha, the downgrader chuckled helplessly as his body disintegrated little by little. Fragments were falling from his body in bite-sized chunks, yet he still continued to laugh like a madman. Killing me has earned you great honor. But is it enough to defeat me? With the help of the source light, the downgrader would be able to revive infinitely. It didn't matter if he was killed. I wouldn't have known if I didn't try. With that, Zen abruptly moved to the side of the black light. The downgrader had made it very clear that the source light could not be damaged, and even went so far as to put it out in the open. Zen studied the black light and began to search the memories given to him by Clarence. Clarence didn't tell Zen how to restrict the downgrader, but the memories revealed all sorts of information on how to use all the extreme form energies. Thus, Zen figured that the methods of restriction must be hidden within them. Zen narrowed his eyes at the source light and immense amounts of extreme form energies started to gush out of his body. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The extreme form energies of 3 different colors overlapped, forming a massive circular altar. The circular altar then shrank quickly and enveloped the black light tightly. The holy seal. Zen didn't know which the best seal was, so he decided to use the stupidest method first. Eventually, he planned to use all the methods that were designed to seal something within. Splash, splash, countless green crystals flowed into the void. Once they surrounded the circular altar, they joined together to form one huge emerald crystal. The life seal. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A square space bigger than the first one wrapped around the emerald gem and then turned into a stable space. The space seal. The heaven lock. Seal. The phase enchanted barrier. Seal. The evil will. Seal. Quote. Although the types of extreme form energies were much fewer than those of the bloodline powers, their combinations were also very rich. The theurgies that evolved from them were strange, birthing more sorts of powerful sealing methods. Zen didn't even stop to think. He relentlessly used all the theurgies that had restricting effects. 10 layers, 20 layers, 30 layers. From within the black light, the dead downgrader gradually came back to life. His hand slowly stretched out from the black light, only to be met by the first seal. Humph, it's only the holy seal. What a childish method. With a careless flick of his wrist, extreme form energy appeared in his hand. Without hesitation, he smashed the holy seal. The circular altar instantly shattered into pieces with a loud bang. Just as the downgrader was about to emerge from the black light completely, he found that there was another layer that sealed him within. The life seal, PSH. Boom, the emerald green gem was smashed into pieces with a single punch. The space seal, break, boom, the square space then collapsed, inch by inch. However, even after destroying 3 layers of seals, the downgrader was met by yet another seal. Damn it, another seal. The downgrader couldn't help but curse. He really didn't expect that Zen would use so many seals. How bothersome. Of course, he had no clue that Zen had actually set up over 100 layers of seals from the outside, and there were no signs of him stopping. Meanwhile, in the chaos, a hush had fallen over the huge square platform. But if one were to activate his spiritual sense, he would be met with countless other spiritual senses. On the square platform, 2 billion brains were working seamlessly, like a well-oiled machine. The real evil god floated from above. After all the information had been filtered, he absorbed the most useful ones. There are 86 kinds of field energy in the 6th grade world. There are 45 kinds of weight energy in the 7th grade world. There are 22 kinds of coupling energy in the 8th grade world. In the 9th grade world, the 2 billion brains were quickly speculating and summarizing. It was surprisingly efficient to communicate with each other with spiritual senses, and it was not as noisy and chaotic as before. In a matter of seconds, 86 kinds of field energy had been completely displayed in front of the evil god. He absorbed this information easily. The 45 kinds of weight energy and 22 kinds of coupling energy, which were the energy forms in the high-grade worlds, were all understood by him. The higher the level of the energy, the more difficult it would become for the evil god to control it. While he could use the field energy, this method consumed a lot of energy. However, the consumption of the weight energy was even more astronomical. The evil god was curious and tried to summon it, but when half of the energy was condensed, his remaining energy had been consumed by a tenth. He still needed to maintain the operation of 2 billion brains. How could he be willing to waste all his energy on this? These 2 billion brains were like 2 billion cultivators at the Holy Soul realm, which consumed a considerable amount of energy. If he couldn't find the source of infinite energy before their current supply of energy was exhausted, the evil god would lose without a fight. As for the coupling energy, although he had found the way, he didn't have the courage to try it. This was something that even he couldn't touch. The speed at which the energy was restored was very fast, basically up to the expectations of the evil god. After all, by now he had already mastered the rules of restoring. However, he was still pessimistic about the matter. He could hear nothing stirring within the burial land. Because they were in different primitive lands, he was unable to find out the situation in the burial land through his omniscient power. However, this was definitely not a good omen. Once the winner was decided, he would be the next goal. Chapter 3891, The Source of Energy. A sense of urgency arose in the evil god. He realized it was necessary to urge the 2 billion brains. Swoosh! The evil god instantly projected his will into the brains. You should realize the meaning of your existence, and that is to find out the best way to obtain infinite energy. Once you obtain it, you will all have freedom and everything your hearts desire. Hearing this, these brains began chattering with their spiritual senses. Of course, we are about to achieve an unprecedented feat. I want a world of my own. 2 billion brains responded, one after another. Once he obtained absolute infinite energy, the evil god would be able to create countless worlds to accommodate them all. The evil god had always pursued freedom. These brains had the same goals as him, but since they existed in the form of brains, they could only help him achieve his ultimate goal. But I'm afraid the victory has already been decided in the burial land, and we have almost run out of time. No matter which side wins, we would lose the chance to resist, the evil god said with a serious honesty. So, please hurry up with your efforts. The higher the level of energy, the less kinds there are, and the faster it will be. We will try our best. You will win the unprecedented glory for us all. 2 billion brains responded in unison. Although the evil god was omnipotent, he couldn't hear every brain's response, but he could choose to listen to the most popular ones. The energy of the 9th grade world was known as cube, and there were only 16 kinds. Just as the brains had said, they became more and more skilled at restoring energy, and once the kinds of energy decreased, their speed of restoration became faster and faster. Basically, every 5 minutes, one more kind of cube energy formed. After 1.5 hours, the 16 kinds of energy of the 9th grade world had been restored. Then they proceeded to restore the energy of the 10th grade world, which was known as phase. Its number was reduced by a half to 8. Very soon, these 8 kinds of energy were also restored. The energy of the 11th grade world was known as frequency, and its number had been reduced by another half to 4. The energy of the 12th grade world was known as coke, and it possessed only 2 kinds. The evil god anticipated receiving the essence of the energy, so he became more and more excited. In the blinking of an eye, he landed on the deck of the black ship and paced back and forth. The Grand Master of Heaven, Duran, Shira, Edna, and the former captain stood on the other side of the deck, their eyes following the steps of the evil god. In fact, they wanted to know what the evil god had achieved, but when they saw the serious look on his face, no one dared to question him. Whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, countless spiritual senses gathered about the black ship. There were too many invisible spiritual senses to fully discern. Their presence even caused a gentle wind to stir Shira's and Edna's long hair. After receiving the information from the spiritual senses, the evil god shut his eyes lightly. After a short moment, he opened his eyes, and they lit up brightly. I see, I see, I see, the evil god shouted into the void. Dear, Edna called out to him with concern. As if he hadn't heard her, the evil god asked, what do you believe the energy to be? Hearing this question, Shira blinked her large eyes. She raised her right hand, and a mass of energy gathered like a blood mist around it. For me, energy is a tool for killing. Energy, it's the root power to maintain my bloodline's might, said Duran. It's the way to rule everything, the former captain responded. Edna pursed her lips, wanting to express her opinion. She considered it for a while but gave up. After a while of contemplation, the Grand Master of Heaven said, energy forms all materials. The two can mold each other. The evil god grinned, giving him a thumbs up before he continued to question, where do the energy and materials come from? They come from higher grade worlds, the Grand Master of Heaven replied. The evil god nodded. If, and I do mean if. What will happen if we transform all the materials into energies and consume them? Hearing this question, the Grand Master of Heaven frowned. It was difficult for him to adequately answer it. Energy was used to create a world, and the energy consumed in this process would be transformed into materials. Energy also had the ability to destroy everything. What happened to the energy used in this process? The consumed energy has completely disappeared, and so has everything else, the Grand Master of Heaven replied. You think it has disappeared, and I also once believed it had disappeared. Everyone believes it has disappeared, but in fact it does not disappear at all. The evil god countered. But then what has happened to it? The Grand Master of Heaven questioned in puzzlement. It has entered the void. The evil god exaggeratedly opened his arms in a gesture of hugging the void. The void is overflowing. All the space, so devoid of any material that we can see, is actually filled with energy. The space in a cup, the space in a room, and also the space in a world are all bursting with energy. Shock was painted all over everyone's face. How is that possible? There is nothing within the void. If there really is energy in the void, how come we can't sense it at all, let alone use it? The evil god looked at them as if he was looking at simpletons and unhurriedly explained, according to my calculations, the energy that is transformed from the materials in the deep space, the main world, and all the secondary worlds only makes up 20%, while the invisible energy in the void accounts for the remaining 80%. More importantly, even when the energy in the void is consumed, it still returns to the void. In this sense, it is absolutely infinite. It was like drawing water from a lake for a bath. After the bath, the water was poured back into the lake. In this way, the water would neither decrease nor increase, and it could be used repeatedly. The Grand Master of Heaven gasped for breath. The words of the evil god seemed so unbelievable, but now it made perfect sense. He continued to ask, if what you say is true, how can we prove it? Prove it. The corners of the evil god's mouth curved upwards, and he gently raised his hand towards the sky. A light blue-colored ribbon unrolled, and this was the field of static electricity. Following that, a dark red-colored ribbon flowed out, representing the life field. Then more fields in black, white, yellow, green, and other colors unfolded like the lines of a rainbow. The energy consumption of these fields was astonishing. Previously, it had been too difficult for the evil god to activate the restriction field, but now, he could easily display all 86 different fields, one by one. From the moment this world was created, the energy in the void remained unknown to us. We simply couldn't comprehend its existence, let alone use such energy, the evil god proudly stated. But now, I have discovered the truth. Chapter 3892, A Larger Primitive Land. According to the judgment of the evil god, he originally wanted to restore the energy up to the one in the 13th grade world, and then find the answer. However, when the energy of the 12th grade world was already restored, he suddenly learned something. As for the two kinds of Coke energy in the 12th grade world, it turned out that one was to create and the other was to destruct. They had no special features, but they were said to be interlinked with each other. They were just the positive and negative sides of energy. After the energy of the 13th grade world was restored, the situation became simpler and clearer. Surprisingly, there was no energy in the 13th grade world. The only secret that it contained was how to control everything. When the evil god finally got this authority, he could now discover the infinite energy that was hidden in the void. It's so beautiful. Shira was deeply mesmerized as she stared at the colorful bands of light that floated in the sky. When the evil god saw her fascination, he gently stretched out his finger. Then, a small dark red band of light appeared on Shira's index finger, looking like an exquisite ring. This is. Shira was surprised as she looked at the band of light on her finger. The energy of the source world is sealed within it. You can use it anytime you want, the evil god said with a faint smile. However, I doubt that you will have the chance to use it. Indeed, the source world was vast, and it contained a lot of energy. However, the evil god needed to face Zen and the downgrader. In a battle involving them, even the energy of the entire source world was far from enough. Despite that, Shira's eyes still gleamed in excitement. It was such a romantic gesture for her that the evil god turned the source world into a ring. If the field energy is in the shape of a light band, then what is the form of the weight energy? The Grand Master of Heaven asked out of curiosity. He was a man with a strong desire for knowledge, and thus he would take any opportunity to broaden the horizon of his wisdom. Wait, it's a kind of energy that is in the form of acute triangles. That's it. Then, all of a sudden, irregular triangular energy blocks appeared in the sky. Coupling is a kind of lumpy energy. This kind of energy won't be seen from the outside. But since it appeared, it has already been integrated, and thus it's uncontrollable. I don't know how people fight in the 8th grade world. Upon saying this, the evil god released the lumps of coupling energy. They had a complicated form and looked like delicate boxes. Since they were already in a complete form, there was almost no energy that was coming from them. Well, the cube energy of the 9th grade world is more interesting. It doesn't have a fixed form, so it could be transmuted into various things. Now, the energy of the 10th grade world. Previously, although all of the 2 billion brains had already restored the energy bit by bit, it could only exist in his brain without the support of the infinite energy. Even the evil god was very curious about such energy, so he displayed them one by one. Meanwhile, the battle in the burial land was still raging on. Crash, boom, a layer of bright red enchanted barrier was suddenly smashed into pieces. After that, the downgrader fell into the illusion that was created by the soul extreme form. In order to resist it, he needed to use another extreme form energy to counter it. However, as soon as he broke out of the illusion, he found himself sealed in an extremely sturdy copper ball. Ha, is this all you can do? Crash, the downgrader continuously shattered more than 100 enchanted barriers and seals that were set up by Zen. It was effortless for Zen to create these enchanted barriers and seals. With the support of the infinite energy, he could construct them without a stop. At the same time, he was also monitoring the downgrader's movements in the black light. When the downgrader attacked the innermost enchanted barrier, Zen would infuse it with the infinite energy. This way, it would take a lot of time and energy before the downgrader could break every enchanted barrier. Consequently, he wouldn't be able to destroy all the enchanted barriers in one go. For quite a while, the downgrader had indulged himself in breaking the enchanted barriers randomly. However, he soon noticed that the sheer number of the barriers that Zen had set up was far beyond his imagination. There would be no end to it if he just continued breaking them one by one. Thus, he temporarily stopped and thought of a way out. At this moment, he was trapped inside an ice tomb. With the aid of the infinite extreme form energy, the ice tomb could actually freeze everything close to it. However, the downgrader saw this as a chance to escape. Although the ice tomb was pretty sturdy and powerful, its weakness was obvious. It would be completely restrained by the flame extreme form. Even if the ice tomb was endowed with absolute infinite energy, it would still be easy to break it using the flame extreme form. Whoosh! In an instant, the downgrader started brewing the flame extreme form in his hands. His slender arms suddenly stretched out of the black light and swept towards the surrounding ice tomb. Break, crash, boom! With an enormous impact, the huge ice tomb collapsed without difficulty. The moment Zen felt that the ice tomb collapsed, he attempted to gather absolute infinite energy to infuse into the next seal. However, the downgrader was well prepared this time and was much faster to take action. Break all the enchanted barriers. Boom, boom, vicious flames formed violent torrents that erupted on a large scale. Without the support of the infinite energy, the enchanted barriers were unable to resist the flames that were released by the downgrader. All the seals and enchanted barriers seemed like thin sheets of paper that were instantly engulfed by a sea of flames. Whoosh! As the downgrader shattered all the enchanted barriers, his voice once again echoed throughout the burial land. Do you think you could suppress me with such petty tricks? Think again. You're too confident because the burial land is protecting you. Then I'll destroy every inch of it. Let's see how you could face me afterward. While the black light could make the downgrader be reborn infinitely, the burial land acted the same for Zen. Moreover, the primitive land gave Zen more abilities. Currently, this wasn't an equal battle anymore. Even the downgrader had to admit that he wouldn't be able to defeat Zen if he didn't destroy the burial land completely. Buzz, buzz. In the blink of an eye, the downgrader appeared at the edge of the burial land. A golden sun rose from his body, devouring all the surrounding materials, and burning a huge hole into the burial land. Then, the downgrader flew along the edge. As the golden sun continued to devour the ground, a huge gap soon appeared on the surface of the burial land. As Zen saw this, he immediately rushed over and tried to stop the downgrader. However, the downgrader's body movements were so fast. His body flickered here and there, and the next moment, he was already at the other end of the burial land, continuing to devour the land with violent flames. If one stood far from the burial land, it would seem like a ferocious bug had infested and devoured the burial land and left it with several huge holes. As the countless holes accumulated to a certain extent, the burial land finally collapsed with a loud bang. Zen wasn't able to do anything to stop its destruction. In the end, he could just helplessly watch it being razed to the ground. However, just as the burial land collapsed, a subtle sensation suddenly arose within Zen's soul. He felt as if he had merged into a larger primitive land. Wait, outside the burial land should only be the chaos. How could there be a primitive land? Zen was utterly confused as he didn't understand what had just happened. What's that look on your face? Are you surprised? Suddenly, the voice of the evil god resounded in his ears. As Zen turned around, he saw that the figure of the evil god was slowly condensing at a distance. His eyes were filled with a familiar mockery as he said, "You were not able to defeat the downgrader after all the time you wasted. What a good-for-nothing. Should you step aside and let me do it for you instead?" Chapter 3893, The One Who Broke the Rules. Zen stared at the evil god's face as if he had met him for the first time. After a few seconds, he asked him, "What place is this?" Before, Zen wondered if he had fallen into the downgrader's illusion. This is the source world," the evil god said, spreading out his arms. Zen looked around, but he found nothing but fragments of the burial land. Everything else was the pitch-black void. "This is the chaos." Zen frowned. "Your primitive land has been integrated into the source world. You and I have the same authority. Why don't you sense the scope of the source world?" the evil god suggested in a taunting manner. Although Zen could not believe what the evil god was telling him, he closed his eyes. As he focused on his senses, he began to feel the huge primitive land. His body flashed slightly and he reached the edge of the primitive land. On a triangular rock, he saw one of the evil god's avatars sitting there as if he owned the world. When the evil god's avatar saw Zen, he was neither taken aback nor threatened. He continued to rest on the triangular rock and played with a rock snake, which he had brought up from under the rock. This avatar was undoubtedly lucky, especially compared to the evil god's 2 million brains. "Oh, look what we have here. It's a special guest," the evil god's avatar said sarcastically. Zen, however, was too busy to reply. He looked past the avatar and into the world behind him. It was the inner wall of the chaos. Is this the edge of the chaos? Zen asked. The evil god's avatar reached out and slapped the inner wall of the chaos. What do you think? Can't you figure that out for yourself? He replied with a smirk. But how did you make it? Zen curiously asked. The evil god's avatar shrugged. I don't know. Go ask the real evil god, he replied plainly. Do you want to sit down? Have a cup of tea? The avatar added, trying to divert the subject. Once again, Zen ignored him and returned to where the real evil god was. Zen's expression drastically changed. He already knew the general situation using his omniscient ability, but he was still a bit confused as to how it happened. The source world was gone, which left behind the black ship, the 2 billion brains on the square platform, and the 6 stones scattered at the edge of the chaos. You relied on the 6 stones to turn the chaos into the primitive land, didn't you? He tried to confirm with the evil god. You can say that, the evil god answered indifferently. But how is that even possible? Of course Zen knew it was possible. He had personally seen it, but he still couldn't believe what the evil god had done. The evil god turned his attention towards Zen, who still looked very surprised. In the past, when I was a creature in your inner world, I was greatly limited. I couldn't understand everything outside. Now, I have more power than I need. You won't be able to understand how much power I have. What you know is just a small drop in a large bucket. I can let you. Before the evil god could finish his smug speech, a cloud of black mist suddenly hovered above him and Zen. Probability extreme form. A voice from the cloud screamed. All of you are going to die. From the cloud came the downgrader. After the destruction of the burial land, the downgrader waited for an opportunity to give Zen a fatal blow. When Zen lost the protection of the primitive land, it became easy to kill him, even if he had the absolute infinite energy. Just as the downgrader was about to unleash an attack on Zen, he noticed the evil god. He flashed them a malicious grin. I'll kill both of you. The downgrader shouted. When the downgrader destroyed the source world, he didn't even bother to clean it up at all. He held absolutely no regard for the evil god. There were countless downgraders in the probability extreme form. All of their energies saturated the area. It made it difficult for anyone to fight the energies. Before Zen and the evil god could even resist, their bodies and souls quickly evaporated, leaving no trace of debris. Buzz. The cloud of probability extreme form disappeared in an instant. It's over. Countless downgraders merged into one form. The 6 pairs of compound eyes on the form's face returned to light green. The downgrader muttered, it still surprises me how difficult it is to deal with these low-grade creatures. Get ready for another surprise. The downgrader heard someone say these words. From his left side, the evil god's figure began to condense, and on his right was Zen's figure. The downgrader's compound eyes began to flash rapidly again. How could you be reborn? He asked in disbelief. See, just as the evil god became shortly distracted in answering the downgrader's question, the downgrader launched an attack. Everything from within a radius of 1 million feet was submerged by the energies. The newly condensed figures of Zen and the evil god turned into powder, disappearing completely. However, just as the downgrader thought he had finally killed the 2 men, their figures started to condense again. As soon as their bodies were back, the evil god looked at the downgrader with fake hurt. Could you let me finish what I'm going to say this time? Shut up, the downgrader growled. Once again, he used his energies to cover the area to kill Zen and the evil god once and for all. Whoosh. As soon as the energies emerged from the downgrader, the evil god gently waved his hand. When he did this, a black light band flashed up and bound the downgrader's body. At the same time, he quickly approached the downgrader. I really do hate being interrupted. How about you? The evil god said before raising his fist and smashing it into the downgrader's head. Bang! The downgrader's body shot up like an arrow in the sky. The evil god quickly moved up, kicking the downgrader downwards. Just as the downgrader was falling, the evil god moved to where the downgrader was, launching a palm strike at him. Bang! 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 The downgrader was like a sandbag, flying up and then falling. It was smart of the evil god to bind the downgrader with black light band because it completely restricted all of the downgrader's powers. He had him at the palm of his hands. The evil god specifically chose to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the downgrader, knowing how much the latter considered this form of battle as an insult to his power. Zen looked at the black light band with a thoughtful expression. That is an incredibly higher level of energy, he thought to himself. Not only had the evil god comprehended the blood powers and the extreme form energies, but he also comprehended a higher level of energy. He was a terrifying opponent. While Zen was in disbelief with what he was seeing, the downgrader was even in more disbelief. He was very sure this was the field energy of the 6th grade world. He was in the silent state field, which was supposedly the most powerful one. However, the 6th grade world had already been completely downgraded and no longer existed. The field energies could no longer be used. Not even the downgrader or Clarence could violate this rule. The only reason why the downgrader could still use the bloodline powers and the extreme form energies was that the deep space and the main world still existed. But how could this mere human being use the field energy? How could he have broken the rules? I've had enough. The downgrader roared. Surging energies gushed out of his body, but they all rushed inside the black light band. This frustrated the downgrader, but he knew what to do. After all, he was born in the 13th grade world. He was very familiar with each level of energy. The silent state field was powerful, but the downgrader forcefully broke through it using several extreme form energies. Swish, swish. As his body emitted the extreme form energies, the black light band, which was first absorbing the energy, began to dissolve little by little. As the downgrader, who had just regained his freedom, was about to launch a counterattack, the evil god told him, "You could use the extreme form energies to break free from the silent state field because of the infinite energy only. What about this? Let's see if you can break through this one." Buzz, buzz. With 2 sharp chirps, 2 asymmetric triangles locked the downgrader. The weight energy. The downgrader cried out loud. He began to scream so loudly that Zen and the evil god thought it would cause the world to shake, but they let him do it. Anyway, it was the only thing the suppressed downgrader could do in this situation. Chapter 3894, Downgrading. Zen was absolutely dumbfounded. Although he didn't know what the weight energy was, the energy level of these 2 triangles was obviously astronomical. On the other hand, the downgrader was hysterical. The weight energy should have been 1 level higher than the field energy. How far has the evil god gone in comprehending the energy? Zen asked, in a daze. This is the energy of the boundless divine world, known as weight, Clarence suddenly spoke up. Ever since he gave the absolute infinite energy to Zen, he had been determined to be nothing but an onlooker. There was nothing in the 3rd grade world that could arouse his interest. He had even predicted how it would develop in the future. However, the method that the evil god just used instantly piqued his interest, causing him to speak again. The energy of the 7th grade world. Zen clicked his tongue. He was able to comprehend it on his own. This is not a problem of comprehension, Clarence said slowly. The 7th grade world has already been downgraded by Mastma, and so, the weight energy can't be used. Therefore, both you and Mastma can only use the extreme form energies at most. But he, Zen, at a loss for words, just pointed at the evil god. I don't know why or how either. Clarence was also very confused. It's really strange that he was able to violate the most basic rules. Clarence had seen many geniuses in his time. From the 12th to the 5th grade worlds, there were all sorts of strange creatures. They had various dreams, goals, great desires and wishes, and were capable of many unimaginable things. At the beginning, Clarence felt it was novel to him, but after a while, he lost interest. Every world had an unbreakable limit, and no matter how powerful a creature was, there was nothing they could do to break it. In a sense, Zen had reached past the limit. He not only obtained the bloodline powers, but also the extreme form energies, and even the absolute infinite energy of Clarence. However, this had been based on the premise that the deep space was not completely downgraded. And yet, now, the evil god suddenly appeared out of nowhere and began to use the field and weight energies. This was just so outrageous that even Clarence couldn't remain silent. The evil god, on the other hand, didn't feel as though he had done anything spectacular. He was too immersed in the joy that came from teasing the downgrader. Well, what's your solution? The evil god laughed tauntingly. By now, however, the downgrader had calmed down. The weight energy was 2 levels higher than the extreme form energy, he realized. But indeed, there was a solution. The higher level energy was like a sharper knife, but if it was attacked by endless energy, its blade could still be blunted, maybe even broken. What mattered most, however, was that the downgrader was also very familiar with the weight energy. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. The densely packed lightning wrapped around the weight energy tightly, flashing violently. The endless energy consumed the weight energy bit by bit, until the surface of the 2 triangles was completely corroded. However, with the current ability of the evil god, it was very easy to repair the weight energy because he also possessed infinite energy. The reason why he chose not to repair it right away was that he wanted to see the desperate look in the downgrader's eyes. Halfway through the battle, the evil god suddenly felt that something was missing. He stretched out his hand and summoned the black ship over. The Grand Master of Heaven, Duran, and the others were all stunned when they saw Zen. What surprised them even more was the sight of the downgrader. After a while, however, they calmed down upon seeing that the downgrader was trapped. This is the downgrader you mentioned. He doesn't look very powerful, the evil god winked at Duran triumphantly. Well, Duran was at a loss for words. He just couldn't believe his eyes. The downgrader, known to be invincible and unimaginably powerful in the Jade Pure realm, was losing to the evil god. When the downgrader overheard what the evil god said, his fury grew tenfold. Once upon a time, he was the superior one. No one other than Clarence could defeat him. He roared angrily, "You are the one who is weak." With that, a ripple of energy exploded outwards. The fine lightning that had been zipping around the energy started to coil into an azure ball. The sharp sizzling sound of electric current lasted for a while, until all of the energy was finally corroded. Just as the energy was about to disappear completely, the evil god raised his hand and snapped his fingers. A vine of energy shot out and wrapped itself around the downgrader like a python. Then, sharp thorns popped out of the vine of energy, piercing into the body of the downgrader, carefully securing him. "You were saying," the evil god said with a crazed smile, waving his hand lazily. When Zen saw the energy vine, he asked, "Is this the energy of the 8th grade world?" "No, it's the cube energy of the 9th grade world. The energy form of the 8th grade world is very special, and it's difficult to use it in this world," Clarence answered. "Has he grasped the energy at the top level?" Zen gasped. "The energy at the top level is the absolute infinite energy," Clarence said slowly. "He can easily use the energy and the cube energy, so he must have mastered infinite energy, or there will be a problem with the supply of energy." Unbelievable. Clarence was in a good mood. He was absolutely fixated on the scene unfolding before him. After all, he didn't want the worlds to be downgraded step by step. According to how things were developed in the past, this was the only way. With the appearance of the evil god, however, the situation seemed to change rapidly. Clarence, who had grown cynical, began to feel a flicker of hope. Once he realized he couldn't get out of the energy vine, the downgrader gave up struggling. His 6 pairs of compound eyes turned green as he silently stared at the evil god, assuming a look of defeat. He calmed down when he finally realized he was no match for the evil god. "Do you think you have won?" the downgrader asked calmly. "He asked that again," Clarence suddenly said. "He always asked me that question," he explained to Zen. In Clarence and Mastma's game of cat and mouse, Clarence had always won. Then Mastma would ask him this question, and then begin to downgrade the worlds. This was almost always the case. But this time, he was asking the evil god the very same question. The evil god smiled nonchalantly. "You can use whatever means you have. I'll give you a chance. Wait and see." Once the downgrader finished speaking, his 6 pairs of compound eyes began to dim, one after another. His body bound by the energy vine began to shrivel, until it disappeared. "You're already dead meat, yet you still try to threaten me," the evil god sneered. Zen, however, knew better. With a grim expression, he said in a low voice, "This is not a threat." The evil god glanced at Zen curiously. "Then what is it?" "He is going to downgrade the world," Zen replied bluntly. "The world will be downgraded into the wall world." The evil god frowned slightly. Only then did it dawn on him that something was wrong. Just then, the black light floating in the void suddenly began to violently tremble. Boom! The vibrations made a big sound, buzzing in everyone's ears. Even the people in the fairy palace and the black ship could hear it clearly. The evil god's figure flashed as he teleported towards the black light, quickly followed by Zen. The two of them eyed the black light warily and saw that the space around it was beginning to shatter. The crushed space, like a thin layer of ice, slowly expanded around the black light. "The space around the black light has been downgraded to the wall world," Zen said gloomily. "At this rate, I'm afraid it will take a long time before the chaos is downgraded," the evil god said with disdain. Chapter 3895, No Solution. Curled up in the black light was the downgrader, elated to see the 3rd grade world slowly downgrade into the wall world. It had been too depressing having lost to a human from the 3rd grade world. Now, he was hell-bent on revenge. "Ha ha, the downgrading will only get faster and faster. I've already mastered all the extreme form energies. Not only will this 3rd grade world be disintegrated soon, so will the other 3rd grade worlds, the 4th grade world and the 5th grade world. They will all disintegrate into the wall world. You losers will all die. You tiny ants, insects, derivatives. As the downgrader muttered foul words, the evil god stretched out his hand, shooting out a purple vine. Whoosh! The purple vine pierced right through the black light, killing the downgrader. Go ahead and curse, that's all you can do. You have no power to fight back. You're the real loser, retorted the evil god. Whoosh! As the black light slightly trembled, the downgrader was reborn along with it. He knew he was no match for the evil god on his own, but with the black light infinitely reviving him, he still stood a chance. After the downgrade, you will turn into nothingness. All of you will rot in history. Only I can live forever. Insignificant humans. Quote, quote. The evil god almost couldn't bear his annoyance. You're too noisy for a downgrader. It's shameful, shut the hell up. Phew. Thin threads of ice appeared from the evil god's hands, shooting into the black light. Once they entered, they curled up bit by bit, merging with the black light until they froze. Frozen along with them was the downgrader. The ice threads came from the phase energy of the 10th grade world. Indeed, the downgrader could rely on his infinite energy to destroy the phase energy, but it would undoubtedly take a very long time. For the time being, he couldn't curse. Once the evil god sealed him off, his gaze fixated on the transparent thin sheet. Turning to Zen, he asked, is it true that the downgrade can't be reversed? As far as I know, there is no solution. Zen shook his head. Believing Zen's words, the evil god merely nodded. They had both fallen into the critical situation. Zen had nothing to gain by lying. What if I inject energy into the sheet? The evil god asked. You can give it a try. In the past, Clarence had used all sorts of methods to prevent the downgrade, all to no avail. Zen didn't think the evil god stood a chance at all. After a while, the evil god reached out to touch the transparent thin sheet. The moment his fingers met the material, they were crushed by an overwhelming force. The nails, skin, bones, blood of his hand all turned to a thin piece. He pulled his arm away immediately as though he felt no pain. Looking at his broken arm, he examined his flat nails, skin, and bones. Are my fingers downgraded? Yes, Zen affirmed. The scene reminded Zen of the eternal scroll painting. There, Zen had also become a picture, but it wasn't a real downgrade, only an imitation. The real downgrade was like the evil god's fingers. As the very state of them changed, they had been completely downgraded from the 3rd grade to the 2nd grade. During this process, everything was destroyed. It was impossible for people to survive as a picture on the eternal scroll painting. From this perspective, the downgrader was right. Once the downgrade began, everyone would eventually turn into nothingness. The downgrade's power is very strong but not necessarily stronger than mine. As soon as the evil god finished speaking, a terrifying amount of energy burst out from his arm. Layers upon layers of black energy covered the back of his hand, forming a carapace as thick as dragon scales. That's the energy of the 11th grade world. There are 4 kinds of frequency energy in the 11th grade world, all controlled by 4 respective races. This carapace is that of the ghost hand race. It has the strongest defensive power. Clarence explained in Zen's mind, getting active. Can the carapace resist the downgrade? Zen asked. No, it can't, Clarence affirmed. Just then, the evil god once again extended his hand to reach for the transparent sheet. Woo, 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 a sudden harsh sound was heard. The carapace on the evil god's arm overlapped with the thin, transparent sheet. Its strength was quite astonishing. Even in the face of the overwhelming downgrading power, it still maintained its own shape, albeit lasting only 2 seconds. Bit by bit, the carapace twisted until it was quickly pressed into the wall world by the downgrading power, along with half of the evil god's arm. Even the frequency energy can't stop the downgrade. The evil god's eyes narrowed slightly, his face turning hard with caution. A new hand rapidly grew from his broken arm. While the new hand didn't seem like anything out of the ordinary at first, it was formed from the energy of the 12th grade world. Only 2 kinds of energy remained in the 12th grade world, the creation coke and the annihilation coke. There was no limit to the 2 kinds of energy. The creation coke, for instance, could recklessly form the toughest material, just like the evil god's hand. Sizzle, sizzle, sizzle. For about 15 seconds in the transparent sheet, the hand held on. But it couldn't avoid its fate of being downgraded. With a cracking sound, the arm's surface began to disintegrate until it was pressed into the wall world. The surprise was evident in the evil god's eyes as his face went stiff. Was Zen right? Was there really no way to stop the downgrade, he wondered. In such a short time, the transparent sheet had expanded about 5 to 6 times in diameter, reaching 100 feet wide. Compared to the scale of the entire chaos, the width of 100 feet was rather insignificant. But according to the downgrader, the speed of expansion would increase exponentially. They didn't have much time left. Everything has a solution. There's nothing in the world I can't deal with. Then, the evil god used the grand teleportation to disappear. Still floating in the void, Zen eventually used grand teleportation as well to return to the fairy palace. Neither the snake goddess nor the others in the fairy palace knew exactly how the battle was going. When Jeffrey saw his father, he went ahead and asked, "Father, what's happening now?" "The downgrader has already been sealed," Zen replied. Everyone's faces lit up with joy upon hearing the answer, but Zen's next words made their expressions freeze. "It's not me who sealed the downgrader. It was the evil god." "The evil god? But why? The entire source world was smashed to bits. How in the world does the evil god still have the ability to do that?" The news left everyone confused. "His strength far surpasses mine, it even surpasses the strength of the downgrader," Zen said with a bitter smile. "What?" Everyone's jaws went slack with shock. Both Zen's and the downgrader's powers were already something beyond their comprehension. To think that the evil god could still far surpass them, just how powerful was he? And the evil god had always been at odds with Zen. If he was so powerful, then how could he have just let go of Zen? "Didn't the evil god attack you?" the snake goddess asked, finding it particularly odd. "No," Zen shook his head. "Why not?" she asked in return. Given the nature of the evil god, it was simply unimaginable that he didn't attack Zen at any opportune moment. Because it would be meaningless. "The world has already begun to downgrade. We're all going to die," Zen replied, calm as ever. Chapter 3896, Born by Accident. Although everyone thought they had been mentally prepared for the coming of the downgrade, when they heard the words coming from Zen himself, their faces darkened. "Will we live, and for how long?" Hilario asked as he trembled. Zen turned around and pointed at the distance. "The downgrade starts from that direction and will rapidly spread out in all directions. I might have to take you far away from here as possible." Whether they could live or not and how long they could live was not even answerable by Zen, yet everyone perfectly understood what he meant. After having experienced countless disasters, these people in the fairy palace managed to stay calm. As Lorena leaned on Mike's shoulder, her eyes swept over Zen, Jeffrey, and Yan, and her lips curled into a faint smile. Now that all her enemies had died, she had no regrets in life. She saw herself already very lucky to be able to spend her remaining time with her family. Roche, Bromley, and the others also displayed a seemingly odd composure. "Alas, it's a pity that my long-cherished wish hasn't been fulfilled yet," Fuxi blurted out downheartedly. "What long-cherished wish?" Zen asked, looking at him in curiosity. "To break the needle," revealed Fuxi. A long time ago, Fuxi had made up his mind to prevent the end of the chaos and become the finale hero. However, things had drastically changed, and the needle that had appeared at the end of this round of chaos was so powerful to the extent that the Eternal Realm warriors could not resist it. He knew that it was meaningless to break the needle now, but he still had this flaming desire deep in his heart. "I'll help you fulfill your dream," said Zen. Fuxi waved his hand and said, "Forget it. If I can't do it myself, it would only be pointless." "No, you will do it yourself." After saying that, Zen gently pointed his finger at Fuxi and massive energy started to pour into his body that made him tremble slightly. As an Eternal Realm warrior, Fuxi couldn't bear too much energy. However, when Zen infused energy into Fuxi's body, he had also strengthened Fuxi's body in order to help him carry the weight of this energy. When Zen had injected enough energy, a thought came to his mind which suddenly moved the entire fairy palace a long distance to the front of the needle. "Go ahead, you can do it," said Zen in a motivating tone as he nodded to Fuxi. Fuxi had never grasped such terrifying energy before, and the feeling of possessing a wonderful abundance of energy could not be put into words. He felt as if he could easily tear anything and everything apart. Whoosh! He jumped up, rising from the ground of the fairy palace. His figure flickered as the winds pressed against his face, and soon landed on the head of the needle. Fuxi broke the tip of the needle and retreated a distance of 10 feet. With a loud shout, he gathered the strength all over his body in his fist and released it. Compared to the huge needle, Fuxi was just a single dust particle. However, the power radiating from this dust particle had surprisingly caused the needle to shatter into pieces and collapse from its head. Clatter, clatter, clatter. In the end, the thunderous sound of the needle collapsing caught the attention of the evil god. The evil god used the power of omniscience to check what had happened and faintly snorted, "Why would he even waste time doing such boring and useless thing? Ha ha ha, I feel great." When he returned to the fairy palace, Fuxi looked satisfied with a wide grin. For more than 1,000 past chaotic eras, he was the only one who had achieved this. He had finally fulfilled his lifelong wish. Certainly, there was nothing happier in the world. Fuxi's upbeat mood influenced the others. The originally dull atmosphere suddenly became cheerful because of him. Fuxi even took out a bottle of wine, inviting everyone to drink with him. Zen withdrew quietly and walked into a courtyard, sitting on a stone chair at the center instead. With a thought, he activated the omniscient power. Instantly, he saw that on the other side of the chaos, the evil god was standing on the black ship, giving out orders to what looked like 2 billion brains. Because of his omniscient power, Zen also found out everything about the evil god and what he had been doing. The evil god had transformed the source world into 2 billion brains at the Holy Soul realm. It was indeed a crazy move. Right now, the evil god placed his hopes on these 2 billion brains, expecting them to come up with a plan to stop the downgrade. Is there really no way to stop the downgrade? Zen asked, sounding desperate. He had verified this answer from Clarence. The answer was very clear as it had been confirmed all the way from the highest grade world. According to past experiences, there is indeed no solution, Clarence's voice suddenly responded. You mean something else with your words, said Zen. After a moment of silence, Clarence continued, experience is based on rules, but if something breaks the rules, experience will be unreliable. Are you talking about the evil god? Zen asked. Well, not only him but also you, replied Clarence. When Clarence saw that the evil god used the energies of the high-grade worlds, he realized that something strange had happened. He then pried into Zen's memories, trying to dig for answers and figure out the cause and effect. The evil god was born from your inner world. In fact, he is the personification of all the negative emotions in your primitive land. From this point of view, the evil god is actually the complete opposite of you, Clarence continued. Zen nodded as he listened closely. Maskma and I have the same origin. He is created by me, yet I can no longer restrain him. Don't you think that your relationship with the evil god is much like my relationship with Maskma? Clarence added, your birth and the evil god's birth couldn't be merely a coincidence. Zen shook his head as he didn't think so. There are many cases like me and the evil god in the world. But the evil god can directly use the power of the high-grade worlds, which is against the basic rules, Clarence emphasized. If I'm not mistaken, you can also use the power of the high-grade worlds. Ha ha, Zen chuckled with self-mockery as he said, I can only use the extreme form energies with your help. I can't even understand the energies of the high-grade worlds, not to mention use them. You will be able to understand after I give the energies to you. After saying that, Clarence injected a massive amount of memory into Zen's mind. It was the information about how the energies of the 6th grade world, 7th grade world, 8th grade world till the 12th grade world, field, weight, coupling, cube, had all been created. The downgrader and Clarence both controlled the energies of the high-grade worlds, but after the high-grade worlds were downgraded, they could no longer do so as the basic rules restricted them. With his eyes closed, Zen digested all the memories in his mind. After a short while, Zen slowly opened his eyes. A trace of excitement then reflected in his darkened expression. He still didn't know if he could find a way to stop the downgrade. If he really stopped it from happening, a battle would definitely emerge between him and the evil god. Relying on the extreme form energies alone, he would surely lose. He indeed needed to grasp the power at a higher level. Energy, field. Zen stretched out his hands and gently rubbed his 2 fingers as the energy started to flow slowly. Buzz. Streams of light blue energy then began to rotate, forming a perfect ring that floated in front of Zen. It was a brand new energy field. I did this. Zen stared at the ring in disbelief. Go on, Clarence urged. Zen then unleashed the weight, coupling, cube, and other energies one after another with an unbelievably smooth process. My judgment is right, said Clarence. Both you and the evil god were born by accident in this world, so you can go on and ignore the basic rules. By accident? What do you mean? Zen asked, looking puzzled. Chapter 3897, Plan. Maybe you don't belong here, said Clarence. I don't belong here. I was indeed born in this world, and so was the evil god, Zen said in confusion. He did not understand why Clarence said such a thing. Zen was a human being who was born in the 3rd grade world, the chaos, and the evil god was a human being born in Zen's inner world. Both of them did not come from distinct backgrounds, and what they experienced was a coincidence at most. Elder Shui, who had gone to the deep space, had created this coincidence. However, Clarence suddenly said those words, which surprised Zen. He had no idea how Clarence came to such a conclusion. I can't explain, Clarence said with a shake of his head. All the way from the 13th grade world to the 3rd grade one, Clarence had seen all sorts of strange civilizations. There was a civilization of pure energy bodies, creatures of pure consciousness, and races in the shape of stone tablets like the sacred spirit race. Yet, no matter how they changed, those creatures, races, and civilizations followed the most basic rules. There were no exceptions. That was also why Clarence did not want to help Zen. He believed that the latter's struggle was meaningless. But the method that the evil god had used violated all those basic rules, which gave Clarence a new perspective. Indeed, the evil god broke the rules. Clarence had thought about this issue, which was why he had asked Zen to give it a try. The result was what Clarence had expected, and that was Zen had the same ability as the evil god. From the high-grade worlds to the low-grade worlds, they are all under your control. Why is there anything that you can't explain? Zen asked. In general, he could only be omniscient in his primitive land, unlike Clarence, who owned the perfect land. Clarence controlled all the materials and energy, but now he had encountered something that he could not explain. Clarence burst into laughter at Zen's question and said, "The truth is that there are many questions that I cannot answer. I don't know where I came from. I don't know who created the perfect land, nor do I know what exists outside the perfect land." All the creatures of every world considered Clarence as the supreme creator, who had all kinds of abilities and was the core of all the rules. In turn, all the creatures he trusted could find any answers from him, and they took him as their guide. But who could lead the way for Clarence? He clearly understood that downgrade felt like a devastating blow to him, but it was impossible to predict what would happen in the 1st grade world. Even the downgrader was also confused, and he did not know what would happen if the world got downgraded to the 1st grade. However, since his mission seemed to be engraved to his bones, it drove him to do such a thing. Clarence continued, "I spent countless years looking for an answer. I have tried many times, and even subdued Mastma in the 8th grade world. I consumed 99% of the energy in the 8th grade world and launched a powerful energy attack. That force must be immensely powerful," Zen said in a shaky voice. "What's the point of being powerful? The world still moves within the rules, and I am just a prisoner in it," Clarence muttered. "Then now I see that you have broken the rules, which gave me hope. There seems to be a gap in the cage of rules," Clarence said in a slightly joyful tone. At first, he was quite indifferent to Zen. For him, Zen was just a new host, but now he had shown a great deal of patience. "Can breaking the rules stop the downgrading?" Zen asked. A flame of hope flickered in his heart. "Maybe, or maybe not," Clarence answered. Before, he was quite sure that it was impossible to stop the process of downgrading, but now he felt optimistic. "What should I do?" Zen asked again. "Devour the evil god," suggested Clarence. When Zen heard those words, his jaw dropped in shock. "The evil god has taken away something that should have belonged to you. If you can take it back, then I might be able to find a way to stop the downgrading," said Clarence. Still, Zen looked a bit hesitant. "We have the same power now. I'm afraid it won't be easy to devour him," he said. "He is inexperienced in using those energies at advanced levels, but I can give my experiences to you," Clarence said with a faint smile. Zen previously had the same power as the downgrader, which was the extreme form energies. However, he was at a disadvantage because the downgrader was much more experienced. If Clarence gave his experiences to Zen, then Zen would have a higher chance of winning against the evil god. Meanwhile, Zen did not stay anything. Instead, he activated the power of omniscience. As for the evil god, he did not pay attention to the fairy palace at all. After all, he exerted all his effort on stopping the downgrading. He had ordered 2 billion brains to think of a solution. In turn, the brains thought that when the evil god won, they would live and escape from being controlled. They hoped that the evil god would give them new bodies and even freedom. Unfortunately, they heard that the world began to downgrade. It made them quite furious, and in order to survive, they had no choice but try their best to help the evil god. Although they actively helped out, this was an unsolvable problem. No matter how many of them were there, they couldn't change the situation. Their original plan was to let the evil god seal the wall world. At that moment, the evil god went to the downgraded area and released a flood of the cold phase. Alas, it was useless. Only crystal clear snowflakes remained in the wall world that had expanded multiple times. Then, the brains asked the evil god to fill the wall world with materials. The evil god tried again. He created 1,000 mountains and threw them in. Those mountains became crushed into thin, grayish-brown pieces and sank into the wall world. Without another word, the evil god even created tens of millions of mountains. It was not hard for him as he possessed an infinite amount of energy and materials. Despite that, the downgrading power could also devour everything indefinitely. It meant that even filling the wall world with materials was not an effective method. One method, two methods, three methods, some time had passed, and the evil god had tried more than 20 methods in a row. The downgrading continued, while the wall world's speed of expansion further increased. It was not long before it had grown to the size of a province in the source world. Just as the evil god looked at the rapidly expanding wall world, he suddenly heard a mocking laugh from the black light in the center of the wall world. Then the black light said, "You can break some rules, but you can't stop the downgrading. Even Clarence can't stop it, not to mention a nobody like you." "Clarence, who is he?" the evil god asked. "He is my creator, but he is also against me. He is omniscient, but he still can't do anything about the downgrading," the downgrader answered. The evil god's eyes lit up. "Where is he?" he asked eagerly. "He is hiding within Zen's body, of course." "Ha ha," the downgrader sneered, in a deliberate attempt to provoke the evil god. After a few moments of silence, the evil god suddenly stretched out his hand, and a ring of energy appeared in his palm. He then grasped the ring of energy, and his body quickly disappeared. In the next second, he appeared in the fairy palace. The energy ring in his hand immediately flew towards Zen and was about to wrap around his head. Even though the evil god's attack was quite abrupt, Zen was not slow to react. He swiftly reached out and gently pinched the edge of the energy ring, which caused it to break. Chapter 3898, The Final Battle. Zen had always been observing the evil god with the omniscient power. He could hear the conversation between the evil god and the downgrader as clear as day. He tensed up and was on guard when he heard the downgrader mention Clarence. He knew very well the sort of temperament the evil god had and how he could explode in a rage at any moment. Now that the evil god knew Clarence was in Zen's body, he would no doubt make a move. But Zen was ready for it, ready to react. Crack, 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 the evil god's eyes flashed in surprise at the sight of the broken energy ring. It was not only Zen's quick reaction that had shocked him, but also the fact that the energy ring was the controlling field, and Zen should not have been able to combat the energy of the 6th grade world. That Zen could crush the controlling field with a mere gentle pinch was inconceivable. The evil god soon calmed himself. He also possessed the omniscient power. With a quick search through his mind, the image of Zen trying the energies of the higher grade worlds came to him. "How about we take this elsewhere?" Zen suggested. "No need," the evil god replied. Lightning flashed from one of his hands. 2 triangular plates flashed with lightning. Lightning wait. Boom. The lightning that struck out from the strike of his palm was 1,000,000 times brighter than the sun, and contained enough energy to destroy the source world 300,000 times, let alone this courtyard in the fairy palace. It would have turned an eternal realm warrior such as Fuxi to powder by its immense power. As the triangular plates made contact with Zen's body, a small space weight appeared in each of the 4 corners of the small courtyard. All the energy that had erupted from the lightning weight was sealed within the courtyard. The fairy palace shook only slightly, and the snake goddess, Fuxi and the others didn't even feel it at all. Zen noticed that the evil god was about to make another move and stretched a hand towards the sky. Splash! The black ship crashed into the side of the fairy palace. The Grand Master of Heaven, Shira and Edna all looked on at the snake goddess and her companions in the fairy palace in a daze. "Now why don't we go somewhere else?" asked Zen defiantly. "Are you threatening me?" The evil god's eyes burned with danger. "What if I am?" Zen asked, grinning. The evil god had once not cared about anything, but things might have changed. His figure silently and gradually vanished, instantly appearing at the other end of the chaos. Zen knew his location by way of the omniscient power and appeared in front of him. They were in an absolute void, where there was not even a speck of dust for trillions of miles. "We won't need to hold back here," announced Zen. However, the evil god was in no hurry to make a move. He seemed to be lost in thought. After a long while, he said, "I will not kill you. All you need to do is ask Clarence to come out and let me devour him. I'm sure I'll find a way to end the downgrading from him." Zen grinned, beaming with amusement, as if he'd been told a joke. Just as he was about to offer his retort, a light emerged from his eyebrows. It was a gentle and soft ball of light, which made both Zen and the evil god feel as though they were bathing in a spring breeze, calm and serene. "You will not be able to find a way to end the downgrading from me. But you may still have a chance if you merge with Zen." It was Clarence's voice that came from the ball of light. He did not seem angered by the evil god's remarks, and instead attempted to patiently persuade him. It seems that you have this idea, too, inquired the evil god. Yes, answered Clarence. Then, the evil god's eyes sparked with an idea. Let's fight with our own abilities then. Before he could get a response, he threw a hand towards Zen and a blood-red vine shot out. This was the cube energy of the 9th grade world. Buzz. Zen disappeared faster than the blink of an eye and retreated more than 1,000 miles. But with the power of omniscience, locating him was easy work for the evil god, and he followed closely behind Zen's teleportation. However, Zen was omniscient as well. Faced with the blood-red vine, he retaliated by materializing a long black sword with the cube energy. He raised his hand up and slashed down hard. Whoosh! The black sword sliced the blood-red vine, releasing a diamond-shaped light that spanned hundreds of thousands of miles. Whoosh! When the black sword slashed the vine once more, Zen and the evil god had already moved 1,000,000 miles away, and another huge diamond-shaped light spot exploded. The evil god kept up his attack, while Zen continued defending. Swish! 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 They began clashing more and more, faster and faster, and the number of diamond-shaped light spots increased as well. Within a few seconds, they had already clashed tens of thousands of times and crossed 1,000,000,000,000 miles of space, and the diamond-shaped lights had turned to tiny needles in the distance behind them. Was this strength given to you by Clarence? Asked the evil god as he continued his fierce assault. Does it make a difference? Zen asked back. Even if you possess the power of the higher grade worlds, you are still weak. He gently drew back the blood-red vine as he spoke. A chill then spread and threads of ice as thin as hair rushed at Zen's head. He had put the cold phase to use. Zen felt as if his blood was about to freeze as he was overtaken by the overwhelming coldness. However, when the evil god had used the cold phase, Zen's eyes were already burning with flames of the fire phase of the 10th grade world. Splash! The fire phase produced very ordinary flames, no different from those from normal wood. But with a roll of the flames, all the ice threads melted and were burned to nothing. This caused the evil god's brow to furrow. Zen had been defending passively. But no matter what sort of energy he threw at him, Zen was able to effortlessly and rapidly deflate it. He suddenly felt as if all was not right and that he might be in danger, as if he had been seen through. Go on, Zen said calmly. The evil god made up his mind and released even more terrifying energy. Thick scales surfaced from his body and wrapped him tightly. The scales, created by the ghost hand race with the frequency energy, were harder than any other. With his new armor on, the evil god pounced once again. Shatter! Zen clasped his hands together and a small square appeared between them. Bang! The small square exploded along with the evil god's armor. The evil god then burst into laughter. He had darted above Zen's head and already had a long spear pressed against his forehead. The spear was made of the annihilation coke. As the strongest destructive force in the 12th grade world, nothing could block it. Go to hell! He thrust the spear down and the restriction field at the edge of the chaos disappeared. As long as the restriction field was still there, this area was a part of the source world, and the evil god and Zen would be omniscient and revived infinitely. To kill Zen, the evil god would have to remove the restriction field and destroy the primitive land. His long spear pierced through Zen's forehead, just as the restriction field was withdrawn. Chapter 3899, Smooth. The evil god's eyes lit up with excitement as the spear struck Zen. Without any resistance, the spear formed from the annihilation coke pierced through Zen's head and slid cleanly into his body. Even as he killed Zen, the evil god released the creation coke. It formed a star-shaped cage around Zen's corpse. Of course, he had no interest in Zen's corpse. He wanted to trap Clarence inside it. A spot on Zen's body began to glow from within. There was a slight crackling sound as a bright sphere emerged from Zen's corpse. The glowing sphere flew up, colliding with the star-shaped cage. The sphere bounced back. It bumped into the cage again, as though trying to escape, but the cage created by the creation coke was virtually indestructible. No matter how hard he tried, Clarence couldn't break free. The evil god slowly descended to the side of the cage. There was a look of great satisfaction on his face as he gazed at the mysterious sphere. Although the energy of the 12th grade world consists only of the creation coke and the annihilation coke, they can change constantly. This cage is the result of a theurgy designed by my 2 billion brothers, and it's more than strong enough to trap you, said the evil god. The sound of Clarence's voice came from the glowing sphere. You have just mastered the energy of the creation coke, but you have already comprehended it and invented ways to maximize and improve it. This star-shaped cage fully displays the advantages of the creation coke. It's incredible. The evil god smiled. With evident pride, he said, my talent is beyond your imagination. You won't regret being devoured by me. Contribute everything you have. The tone of amazement vanished from Clarence's voice, replaced by indignation. Never. Once more, the sphere began to try to escape, colliding over and over again with the star-shaped cage. But Clarence's efforts were useless. The star-shaped cage did not budge even an inch. It's useless, said the evil god calmly. He lifted his hand, and the star-shaped cage began to shrink. The space left for Clarence became smaller and smaller. Finally, he was tightly enclosed by the cage, with no room to move. I heard that you are the one who created the downgrader, and also the ruler of the highest level. It's too stupid for you to go into such a situation with such a strong power. It's a waste for you to keep such power. The evil god said, stretching out his hand. His fingers elongated until they resembled slender threads. Although his fingers were no thicker than noodles, they were powerful. They slid into the cage and began drilling into the sphere. You will regret this. No one can devour me. You are digging your own grave. Clarence roared, sounding furious and aggrieved. The evil god laughed. Both you and the downgrader are so arrogant. Worse, you are weak. With that, the evil god closed his eyes and began absorbing the sphere through his fingers. The sphere dimmed and shrank at an astonishing speed. Clarence's voice became weaker, and then there was silence as he stopped speaking completely. After absorbing Clarence, the evil god slowly opened his eyes. On his face was a look of wild, undisguised joy. He moved and arrived almost instantly at the center of the chaos, where he stood on a high spot, surveying the darkness of the black light beneath him. Because the world was being downgraded, there was an extremely strong traction force above and below the wall world. However, it had no pull upon the evil god. You have failed 26 times. Do you want to fail the 27th time? The downgrader asked sullenly. He had already broken free from the cold phase imposed by the evil god, but he knew that he was no match for him. So he simply hid within the black light and waited for the world to be completely downgraded. We won't know until I give it a try, the evil god said casually. Once the world is downgraded, there is no possibility of reversal, the downgrader sneered. He emitted a bark of sharp laughter, enveloped in the black light. The evil god was in a good mood, so he ignored the mocking tone of the downgrader. He said, I don't need to reverse the downgrading. All I need to do is stop it. There was a rush of air as the evil god suddenly raised his hand. Immediately, the whole world began turning into ice and snow. A massive wave of huge ice crystals swarmed into the atmosphere. At first, the wall world devoured these ice crystals easily. However, the barrage of ice crystals kept coming, until the world could no longer resist. Slowly, everything stopped, and the world froze over. How is this possible? The downgrader exclaimed, unable to hide his shock. He shook his head in denial. It's impossible. With that, deep within the black light, the downgrader burst out the flame extreme form. He tried to use the energy to melt the frozen wall world. But even as he made his move, he felt a blast of cold air pouring into the black light. The evil god was suppressing him again. It's over, said the evil god. He stared down at the black light and saw that the wall world was no longer expanding. Instead of satisfaction, for some reason he felt a stirring of uneasiness. Everything was going so smoothly that it seemed too good to be true. He moved again, and arrived in a flash above the fairy palace. Most of the black ship was already destroyed, since Zen had earlier pulled it over and crashed it into the fairy palace. But the black ship was not so easy to destroy. After the ship was repaired by the former captain, it floated in the air again. Neither the fairy palace nor the black ship made a move. They only maintained a certain distance between them, each seeing the vigilance of the other. Without warning, the evil god appeared on the deck of the black ship. Edna, Shira, the Grand Master of Heaven, and Duran let out sighs of relief. Those in the fairy palace had the opposite reaction. The faces of the snake goddess, Fuxi, and their companions darkened. What has happened to Zen? The snake goddess shouted. You know the answer to that. Only one of us could live in the end, said the evil god, laughing softly. He clasped his hands behind his back. At those words, many of those in the fairy palace bowed their heads with grief. Some wanted to rush to the black ship and attack, but even the slightest glance from the evil god was enough to incapacitate them. When he stared at them, they collapsed to the ground, unable to move. Right now, the evil god was the absolute ruler of the fairy palace. Not even the downgrader could resist him, let alone the humans in the fairy palace. The evil god's smile disappeared, and he gazed grimly at those in the fairy palace. Go to hell, he cried, raising his hand, prepared to crush everyone. But Edna stepped forward, stopping him. Dear, this world has become far too desolate. Please don't kill anyone else. There was nothing now in the whole chaos, only an endless void. Edna didn't like this kind of world very much. The evil god paused, then turned to give her a faint smile. Since you intercede, I'll leave them alive. As you said, this world is indeed too desolate. Let me see what I can do. He stretched out his hands and moved them through the air, as though he was drawing something. The sky above them lightened to a soothing azure. The earth extended around them. Mountains, rivers, canyons and basins appeared one after another. Tall walls, pavilions, and streets were created instantly, sprinkled across the landscape. Now, people, declared the evil god. He waved his hands in the air again. Instantly, the empty world changed. It was now entirely populated, filled with people who moved and looked around them with wide eyes. Come with me, said the evil god, taking Edna by the hand. He pulled her into his embrace, and together, the two of them soared into the air above the city. When the people below saw the two beings floating above them, they all dropped to the ground, prostrating themselves before these seeming gods. The evil god had seen this scene before, when he was very young. The people had worshipped Zen as their creator. He felt a surge of pleasure as he realized that with Zen dead, he now held that position. Where is our home? Edna asked, safely enclosed in the arms of the evil god. There, the evil god replied, looking ahead. A broad, elegant courtyard was sprawled on top of a majestic snowy mountain. The evil god led Edna into the courtyard, and they landed gently on the ground. A peaceful mood had come over the evil god now that his victory was complete. He felt utterly relaxed, content to stay here without moving. You deserve some rest. Go to sleep, said Edna gently, touching his face. Her soft voice was hypnotic, and soon, the evil god found himself lying on a bed. He settled down and let his eyes close. However, almost as soon as he closed his eyes, they snapped back open. His face was full of anger. A sudden chill ran down his head to the base of his back, leaving a trail of iciness all along his spine. Chapter 3900, Fight Hand to Hand. Edna, the evil god called his wife. What's wrong, honey? His wife responded softly. She smiled faintly and batted her long lashes. Her beauty could have made any man weak. Do you remember what I told you before? The evil god asked. That when everything is settled, we would live in seclusion. Edna nodded. Yes, I remember how you liked to live in seclusion back when we were in the inner world of the Creator. Crack. Before she could even finish her sentence, the evil god grabbed her by the neck, flames spurting out from his hands. In the blink of an eye, the flesh and muscle were incinerated, leaving only her ghastly white bones. The bones hissed under the heat of the flames and trembled violently. Humph! Break! The evil god shouted, his voice filled with rage. Flashes of lightning burst forth from his eyes. Everything the lightning touched was sliced into pieces. The unique courtyard, the blue sky, the earth, the city. Everything in this world started to collapse, revealing a translucent egg membrane. From within, the evil god caught sight of Zen standing outside. You attempted to trap me in an illusion. The evil god spat coldly. Zen raised his eyebrows curiously. He's found out the truth. We've failed. This had been Clarence's plan. No matter how high the level of energy was, it was still easy for one to fall into an illusion. This was the same strategy the downgrader had used to trap Zen with the soul extreme form previously. In all their battles, Clarence had always created a huge illusion to suppress the downgrader. Unfortunately, they had underestimated the evil god. His instinct was extremely keen. Having grown up in cruelty, he had absorbed all the negative emotions in Zen's inner world. It was unsurprising he had become a cold-blooded killer. This pleasant world didn't align with things he was familiar with, so he saw through the deception quite easily. The illusion might have only lasted for a moment, but it was enough to place the evil god in an extremely dangerous position. Every hair on his body stood up. Go to hell, the evil god roared, suddenly stretching out his hand to grab at Zen. In the blink of an eye, Zen managed to retreat backwards more than 10,000 feet. However, to his surprise, the evil god's arm closed that distance swiftly, grabbing him by the neck. Splash! A powerful force of space was applied to the two of them, and the next moment, they arrived above the wall world. The evil god ruthlessly pressed Zen towards the wall world. Crack, crack, crack. The instant Zen's feet touched the wall world, they were downgraded, shattering into thin slivers of blood. Then his legs, abdomen, and chest suffered the same fate as these parts connected with the wall world. Seeing that his entire body was being pressed into the wall world, Zen struggled to shift to the side, grabbing the evil god by his shoulders. Gritting his teeth, Zen twisted what was left of his body, dragging the evil god into the wall world. Crack! Crack, crack. Because the evil god's body had been strengthened by the frequency energy, the process of downgrading was even more intense. An ear-piercing sound erupted and sparks shot out as his body was downgraded. In a matter of mere seconds, only the evil god's head remained of his body. Buzz! The energy of the creation coke roared to life once again. Just in the nick of time, the evil god's body began to grow from the top of his head. A neck, then his body, arms, and legs sprouted from his scalp like strange plants. As soon as his arm was developed, he threw a punch at Zen's chest. It was powerful enough to fling Zen backwards, away from the evil god. Having gotten rid of Zen's grasp, the evil god was finally able to gather his bearings. Firmly clasping his head from both sides, he gently pulled his head off and straightened it before planting it firmly back on his neck. Zen also took this opportunity to recover his missing lower body. Great, you truly are worthy of being my nemesis. Again, the eyes of the evil god flashed viciously, like a hungry beast eyeing its prey. After leaving Zen's inner world, the evil god was faced with even more challenging worlds. In the source world and the chaos, he had encountered all sorts of opponents, but no one had come close to being as difficult to deal with as Zen. In the eyes of the evil god, only Zen was strong enough to be his opponent. Even the downgrader and Clarence weren't worthy. Swoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, the evil god pounced on Zen once more. Zen gritted his teeth as the evil god approached, making no attempt to dodge. He knew that this was a difficult battle he couldn't run away from. If the evil god was his other self, then he had no choice but to deal with him now. Just as the evil god was about to collide into him, Zen leapt upwards. His body drew an arc in the air, until he kicked the evil god, sending him straight towards the wall world. Crack, crack, crack. One of the evil god's legs was downgraded upon impact, but he'd managed to grab onto Zen's foot, dragging Zen along with him. The two of them seemed to be fighting hand to hand on a vast snow plain, and anything that touched the line of snow would disappear. However, whenever they escaped from the line, their bodies would recover instantly. It all happened so fast. Anyone watching from afar wouldn't have been able to tell that they were ever injured. Crack, crack, crack. Zen and the evil god rolled and crawled along the surface of the wall world. Sometimes, the right half of Zen's body completely disappeared, leaving only the other half. On the other hand, the upper half of the evil god's body was downgraded, leaving only his legs and the lower half of his body. At some point, only half of Zen's skull was left, whereas what was left of the evil god was just a finger. Fortunately, the two of them had become too strong that even their physical bodies couldn't restrain them, and even their cinnabar fields no longer existed. Consequently, as long as a part of their bodies was still alive, they could recover in an instant. As they continued to fight each other head-on, the downgrader watched quietly from within the black light. He never would have imagined that the battle would be so fierce. It never occurred to him either that they would use the wall world as a weapon. Initially, the downgrader had no intention of joining this battle. After all, the downgrading had just begun. He only needed to sit this out patiently. However, as he watched the two of them roll back and forth on the wall world, he began to feel as though they weren't taking the downgrading seriously. Since you two are so intent on killing each other, why don't you just die together? The downgrader decided to take this as an opportunity to strike, suddenly appearing above the two of them. The extreme form energy that had been stored for a long time suddenly exploded. Swoosh! The downgrader initially thought that this would be enough to push both of them into the wall world. However, when he had released the extreme form energy, the two barely even flinched. While it might have looked like they were fighting hand to hand, they were in fact using the creation coke and the annihilation coke alternatively. Moreover, they had the strongest bodies and the most destructive power. The extreme form energy simply paled in comparison. Fuck off. The evil god threw a punch in his direction without even looking, and the once arrogant downgrader was blasted away instantly. Zen somersaulted in the air, simultaneously activating the cube energy. As he pointed at what remained of the downgrader's body, the cube energy enveloped the fragments and sent them to oblivion. Without batting an eyelash, the two managed to kill the downgrader before he even had the chance to strike. Without pausing to take a breath, Zen and the evil god continued to fight each other fiercely.